The man who was fighting with Xiao Xian also quickly left the place, but the husband and wife went in different directions. The moment the two of them left, Gigu appeared with 10 or so people. They split into two groups and chased after them. Xiao Xian didn't chase after them. He knew that with the strength of the two people, it would be difficult for Gigu to catch up. He was now certain that the man who fought with him was the one he met at the drumming tribe last year. Perhaps, he had stolen something from the drumming tribe. What made Xiao Xian feel strange was that these two people didn't reveal any real killing intent, whether it was at the drumming tribe or when they were hiding in the Yanjiao tribe. Xiao Xian didn't use his sword just now. He had left some leeway. Not long after, Gigu and the others returned. From his expression, it was clear that they didn't catch up. How was it? Xiao Xian asked. They ran. I saw them run out of the forest. Gigu said. The white falcon in the sky also returned. It also didn't manage to track them. Those two, are they also robbers? Gigu asked. Should be. Xiao Xian answered. Gigu's expression became worse. He sent more people to strengthen the patrols in case the two came back again. They went to the place where the new Yanjiao people lived. Xiao Xian described the two people's faces and figures. Not long after, with the help of the people there, they found the place where the two impersonators lived. Here. Gigu kicked the door open without hesitation. Some people around heard the noise and looked over. They didn't know what was going on, but they recognized Gigu and Xiao Xian. One was the chief of the tribe, and the other was a young elder. They were both people of high status in the tribe, so they didn't dare to ask. Xiao Xian whispered something to Tuo and walked into the house. Tuo didn't follow him in immediately. Instead, he revealed to the people around that the couple living here had secretly left and stole something from the tribe before they left. He didn't tell them the real truth. If they knew that there were people from other tribes in disguise, it might cause panic. These new people, who had just settled down, could overthink things and even suspect each other. This was not what the shaman and chief wanted to see. So Xiao Xian asked Tuo to reveal only a little. Knowing that they were defectors, the others were filled with righteous indignation. Those who had more contact with the couple also said a lot of things about them. At the same time, they separated themselves from the two for fear of being misunderstood. They would never be defectors. In the house, Xiao Xian looked at the furnishings inside. It wasn't much different from the other residents. Everything looked normal. Gigu looked around and listened to the information provided by the people around. If he guessed right, these two people had been hiding in the tribe before winter. They hadn't been discovered for a whole winter, and they even went to the ceremony with them. If the two of them caused a ruckus during the ritual, thinking of this, Gigu and the others couldn't help but break into a cold sweat. Then they became so angry that they smashed the wooden table next to them. Xiao Xian and Gue he searched around the house but didn't find anything useful. Xiao Xian and Gue he then went to the chief together to report this matter. Thieves had entered the tribe and hid very well. This made the chief Ao very vigilant. Go and re-register the names of every family in the tribe. Ta and Gigu, you are in charge. Ao said in a deep voice. Yes. Last year, because many things were done in a hurry, there were many omissions and loopholes. Now that such a thing happened, Ao needed to clean up the internal people again. No, not only the people in the Yanjiao tribe, but also the wanderers living in the periphery had to be re-registered and checked one by one every once in a while. The two team leaders left with their people. Ao looked at Xiao Xian standing next to him and asked, Xian, how did you find them? Intuition, Xiao Xian said. He didn't know why, but after seeing the two people, he felt something was wrong. He followed them and felt more and more that something was wrong. When he was in the drumming tribe, he could find that person because he was in the state at that time. He could feel different totems around him. That person was exposed. After that, Xiao Xian rarely had that state. Therefore, when he saw the couple, Xiao Xian was just confused. Later, he was sure that they were not from the Yanjiao tribe. Ao didn't ask about Xiao Xian's answer in detail. He thought about the two people in disguise again. He didn't want to be like the drumming tribe, who didn't know that something was stolen. I will send more people to the shaman's place. You should be more careful. When Ao said this, he glanced at Xiao Xian's neck. What he meant was, you also have a precious treasure left by your ancestors. Be careful and don't lose it. After leaving Ao's place, Xiao Xian walked around with the patrolling people. When he passed by the residential area of the Yanjiao newcomers, he left the team and planned to go there again to see if he could find any clues. It was a wooden house similar to the surrounding area. In the house, there was a wooden table broken by Gigu. There was a lot of wood debris on the ground. Some things next to it had traces of being moved. Gigu had brought people here to search. The wooden house was about 20 square meters. The furnishings were simple and easy to see at a glance. The wood on the wooden wall had been knocked, and there were marks left by tools. The ground had been dug, but they probably didn't find anything. The person who came was so angry that he stepped on the wooden stool and broke it. They didn't find anything unusual. They were just like the others who hadn't awakened their totemic power. There was nothing special about them. No, there was something special. Xiao Xian sniffed carefully. Because he had been exposed to a lot of herbs with the shaman, he had a better ability to distinguish herbs. There was a faint smell of grass. It wasn't bitter medicine, so it wasn't easy to detect. Next to the stove made of simple stones, there were some light green debris. Xiao Xian dipped his finger in it and sniffed. Those two were injured. It should be a recent injury. Thinking of the sacrifice a few days ago, Xiao Xian wondered if it was caused by the repulsion of the fire seed during the sacrifice. But why were thieves so bold nowadays? They were willing to experience the repulsion of the fire seed just to steal something. How dedicated. If the two who escaped knew what Xiao Xian was thinking, they would definitely curse him. If it wasn't for you, they wouldn't have been injured to the point of vomiting blood. After looking around, other than the medicinal dregs, he didn't find anything suspicious. Xiao Xian was about to leave, but before he left, Xiao Xian thought for a while and turned back. Using his special ability, he scanned the house. Everything in the surroundings darkened. The wooden walls, stones, and other objects also lost their original color and became dull gray, except for one place. Xiao Xian's gaze stopped at the foot of the wooden wall. There, it was different from the surrounding gray. There was a faint light. It wasn't bright, but compared to the surrounding gray, it was very obvious. Closing the door of the wooden house, Xiao Xian walked over and looked at the dim light at the foot of the wall. It seemed to be coming from underground. Unable to see what was buried underground, Xiao Xian took out a short knife and started digging. As the soil and stones were dug out, the light became stronger and stronger. Finally, Xiao Xian saw a glowing object. Exiting his special vision, Xiao Xian looked at the object in his hand. It was an animal skin bag. The object inside was about the length of a forearm. It was cylindrical. He opened the animal skin bag and took out the object inside. It was a wooden cylinder. He couldn't tell what species it was. It wasn't bamboo, but it wasn't the ordinary wood Xiao Xian had seen before. It was slightly harder. There was a wooden plug at one end of the wooden cylinder. It was tightly plugged. There was a golden mark near the mouth of the wooden plug. It was the color of gold powder. Was there such a shiny gold pigment? Or was it some kind of metal? Could it be that these two people had stolen the treasure from some tribe? Xiao Xian was curious and wanted to pull out the wooden plug. Although it was just a wooden plug, it couldn't be pulled out without a bit of strength. At least, an ordinary wanderer wouldn't be able to pull it out.
In order to prevent the thing inside from falling out, Xiao Xian pulled out the wooden plug with force. The wooden cylinder was filled with golden powder. If it was placed in front of Yang Guang, it would definitely be dazzling. Gold? No, not gold. It wasn't even any metal. Xiao Xian weighed the wooden cylinder slightly and used the stone knife to pick up some. The gold powder wasn't as heavy as metal or stone. It was more like wood. Golden wood? It wasn't dyed, but naturally golden. What kind of tree was golden? Xiao Xian really didn't know. But what was the use of the gold powder? Was it worth it for the two to bury it so carefully? They probably buried it when they built the house. Generally speaking, if those two people wanted to sneak into the Flaming Horns tribe, they would hide the things they stole in a hidden place, and then sneak in. However, it could also be that the things they stole were too precious, so they didn't dare to casually leave them. They had to bring them with them. In the Yanjiao tribe, they were afraid of being found and suspected, so they hid it at the foot of the wall in the house. They hid it quite well. The golden color on the wooden plug was the gold powder in the wooden cylinder. This meant that the wooden plug had been pulled out, but it had been a while. Xiao Xian dipped some gold powder and waited for a while. He didn't feel any pain, so he became bolder. In his special vision, the wooden cylinder and the gold powder in it all had a little light. The gold powder's light was a little brighter than the wooden cylinder's, but it wasn't the brightest. The real light source was still inside. Looking around, Xiao Xian took a wooden plate. There were many flaws on the wooden plate. It wasn't perfect. It looked like it was made by someone who wasn't skilled enough. People who saw it wouldn't doubt the real strength of the two people. In terms of details, the two people did a good job. After wiping the wooden plate, Xiao Xian poured out the gold powder from the wooden cylinder. When the gold powder fell on the wooden plate, it made a fine sound like sand, but it wasn't as heavy as sand. When the gold powder was poured out, a square, dark green object was poured out along with the gold powder. Xiao Xian carefully pinched a corner of the object out of the gold powder. It looked like a part of some kind of leaf, but it was cut into a square. There were cut marks on both ends, but not on the other sides. The veins on the leaf could be clearly seen. Xiao Xian felt that the wooden cylinder was very old, but this leaf looked like it was newly plucked. It didn't look withered at all. Sniffing it carefully, he could even smell the light scent of plant leaves. This scent was shocking. Even though it wasn't strong, it made people feel refreshed. It was as if all the fatigue in the body had been dispelled. What made Xiao Xian even more curious was the drawing on the leaf. He couldn't tell what it was.
The lines were twisted and messy, and it didn't look like a drawing. Words. It didn't look like one either. Xiao Xian carefully blew away the gold powder that covered the leaf. He wanted to see the drawing more clearly, but as he looked, he realized that the golden words formed by the gold powder on the dark green leaf were gradually fading. Xiao Xian didn't blow anymore. The surrounding doors and windows were tightly shut. Even if the wind blew in, it wouldn't disperse the gold powder so quickly. Moreover, the gold powder on the wooden plate was fine. Only the gold powder on the leaf was fading quickly. Xiao Xian wanted to bury the leaf back into the gold powder. He wondered if it would be better and stop the dispersal of the gold powder. However, before he could do anything, his vision turned black and he lost consciousness. Chapter 268. In fact, the couple who escaped from the Yanjiao tribe did not go far. They originally thought that if they could not hide in the Yanjiao tribe, they could hide in the peripheral wanderers area. However, not long after, the Yanjiao people began to check the list of wanderers one by one. Let's wait for the right time. There will always be people who leave. Then it will be our chance. Yes. The thin woman had become plump, and her face had changed. Even if they were found, no one would think that they were the traitors. Thinking of something, the woman suddenly asked, "What about that thing?" "What thing?" "The longevity leaf." The woman gritted her teeth. Hearing this, the man suddenly understood and then said indifferently, "It's okay. When the wind blows over, we will go back and dig it out." "If it is dug out." The woman was worried. They had picked up the treasure when they were hiding something. It was in an underground cave, and there were a few skeletons beside it. They didn't know which tribe they belonged to, but judging from the hardness of the bones and the degree of preservation, these people must have been very powerful warriors in the past. The treasure was next to the skeletons. Whether it was the treasure itself or the people who had been dead for a long time, there was no sign of any tribe. After an unknown number of years, the wooden cylinder had already changed color. However, the leaf inside was still fresh. That was the longevity leaf. It was said that the leaf would not rot after 10,000 years. It could be kept fresh for 10,000 years. A long time ago, the shamans of the tribe used it to record the inheritance. However, there were very few longevity leaves that had been passed down. Now, almost no one had seen the longevity leaf, let alone looking for the rare plant that was thought to be extinct. They had only heard about it before, but had never seen it with their own eyes. However, when they saw the leaf, they were both shocked. After the shock, they were happy. If they could get this treasure, maybe their ranking in the robbers would rise a lot. It was a pity that they could not understand the strange lines on the leaf. Because he was too curious, he didn't feel at ease leaving it outside. So when he sneaked into the wanderers of the Flaming Horns tribe, he took it with him. Anyway, it would not be conspicuous if it was wrapped in a tattered animal skin. After entering the Yanjiao tribe, they had also locked themselves in the room and secretly studied it for a long time, but still failed to discover the hidden mystery. Perhaps, only the shaman of the tribe could explain it. Who would think of digging up things there? Even if they tore down the house, they might not be able to dig it out. Even if someone finds it, we can just steal it back. Besides, how can it be so easy to find it? Even if they find it, they might not be able to understand it. How can it be easy to use longevity leaves to record it? That's true. The woman was relieved. However, the two men did not know that the things they had buried in the house had already been dug out by Xiao Xian. On the other side, Xiao Xian was unaware of the outside world. Naturally, he did not know that after he lost consciousness, the dark green leaf in his hand that looked like it had just been plucked quickly withered and turned yellow after all the gold powder disappeared. Then, it weathered and fell to the ground like sand, mixing with the other dust on the ground and becoming indistinguishable. At this moment, although Xiao Xian knew nothing about the outside world, he could see the totem in his sea of consciousness and the strange pattern drawn on the leaf. Why would this picture appear here? Was this also a totem? No, it was not. Xiao Xian looked at the strange moving picture. It was like a living thing, jumping up and down. A worm? A snake? Or something else? It had no eyes, no limbs, only a monotonous line that existed there, but it kept moving. What the hell was this? Xiao Xian did not know much about this world. His knowledge of history and other things was even more shallow. He had only heard about it from the mouths of others, and it was even more difficult to tell whether it was true or not. He did not know what the leaf he had been holding before he lost consciousness was, nor did he know what the gold powder was. He also did not understand what the flowing lines represented. While he was puzzled, Xiao Xian found that in addition to the strange line pattern, there was a pair of hands faintly appearing. With the appearance of the hands, the flat pattern became much more three-dimensional. This time, Xiao Xian could guess what it was. When he was learning traps from old Ku, he had also learned several new ways to tie knots. What he saw now was like a pair of hands, holding a rope and tying a knot. It was just tying a knot. Was there a need to be so mysterious? Xiao Xian still did not understand. But the more he looked, the more he felt that something was wrong. This was not a knot used to set a trap. It was more like a message, a very important and powerful message. After staring for a long time, Xiao Xian did not see the pair of hands tying a knot. They just kept moving around, and it was a little chaotic. While Xiao Xian was staring at the knot in his mind, in reality, in the Wu's stone house. Chief Ao, the Wu, the two team leaders, Tua, and some of the people from the previous advance group were gathered here. Their attention was focused on the same place. There, a person was lying on a piece of animal skin. Chief, what happened to Xian? Was he sneak attacked? Kiki asked in a low voice. Ta glanced at him. He did not say anything, but his face was very pale. Not only Ta, but also in the house, no one was happy, especially Gigu. Gigu had taken people to check the name list of the newcomers' residential area in Yanjiao today. He had also searched the houses of the two suspicious people, but did not find anything unusual. However, just as he was about to leave, he heard from people nearby that Xiao Xian had been here, but did not see when he left. Gigu wondered if Xiao Xian had gone to the houses of the two defectors again, so he planned to go and check it out. Unexpectedly, when he went in, he found Xiao Xian lying on the ground. He was so scared that his hair almost stood up. Xiao Xian had just been appointed as an elder. If something happened to him, the Wu and the chief would definitely go crazy. Fortunately, Xiao Xian was breathing normally. However, no matter how hard they tried, they could not wake him up. Gigu had to bring Xiao Xian to the Wu for help. However, even the Wu could not wake Xiao Xian up. Gigu told the Wu and Ao what he had seen after entering the wooden house, including the newly dug hole near the foot of the wall, the empty wooden cylinder on the ground, and the gold powder in the wooden plate. The two team leaders suspected that the two defectors had come back and wanted to dig up the buried things, but Xiao Xian had bumped into them and knocked Xiao Xian out. However, it did not make sense. There were no wounds on Xiao Xian's body. It did not look like he had fought with anyone. Besides, if the two defectors could knock Xiao Xian out so easily, why didn't they just kill him? Unable to come up with an explanation, the others could only remain silent. The Wu dipped the gold powder in the wooden plate that Gigu brought over and rubbed it with her fingers. Her eyes flashed. He moved. Look, Xian moved. Gigu, who had been staring at Xiao Xian, exclaimed. Everyone looked at Xiao Xian, who was lying on the animal skin. They saw Xiao Xian's fingers on both sides of his body moving. There was no pattern to it, but it seemed to be caused by a conscious reaction. But soon, the trembling fingers moved a little more, and his wrist moved from time to time. At the same time, Xiao Xian seemed to be enduring something very strenuous. His physical strength was quickly consumed, and his face was covered with sweat. He did not fight or do anything else. He was just lying there. How could his physical strength be consumed so quickly? Everyone was surprised. Did he have a nightmare? Kiki whispered. This man was so scared that his forehead was covered with sweat. Was he hunting ferocious beasts in the forest in his dream? Looking at Xiao Xian's hand movements, the Wu felt that it was not like what Kiki had said. It seemed to be somewhat familiar. Thinking of something, the Wu's pupils shrank. She raised her hand and waved at the others. She wanted to drive them away. The two team leaders drove the others out, and intended to go back into the room to check on Xiao Xian. However, they were blocked by Ao, who came to close the door. He did not want to let them in. Ta opened his mouth and wanted to say something. However, his father stared at him, and he became quiet. He turned around and went out with Gigu. After the others left, Ao closed the door and came over. Seeing that Xiao Xian did not wake up, he asked the Wu in confusion, "What do you think?" The Wu stared at Xiao Xian's hand movements, and sighed helplessly, "Look at his hand movements." They are not like fighting or anything else. They are like knots. Knots? Ao was even more confused. A long time ago, before the written language appeared, the ancestors of the tribe used knots to record things. Knots, teaching, and reading were like an early language. It was a popular way of communication and inheritance at that time. It was also called conclusion by the later generations. When writing gradually appeared and became popular, it gradually replaced the position of knots to record things and became the mainstream medium of communication within the tribe and between tribes. In the end, it led to the withdrawal of knots to record things, and the conclusion was hard to find. Even in the Flaming Horns tribe 1,000 years ago, they were mainly written in words and patterns. All the records were written in pictures. It could be said that now, except for the Wu of the tribe and his successors, no one would learn knots. You taught Xian the conclusion. Ao was surprised. Since Xiao Xian was not the candidate for the next Wu, why did he teach him the conclusion? The Wu shook his head. I have never taught him. Could it be Guizhe? Absolutely impossible. Without my permission, Guizhe would not make a decision. An. The Wu did not finish his words. He was just suspicious, because if Xiao Xian's hand movements were related to knots, it was too complicated. It was different from ordinary knots. If you did not teach him, where did he learn the conclusion? Ao was not suspicious of Xiao Xian's intentions. He was just confused. In his opinion, knots to record things had long been eliminated. It was useless to learn it. If he had the time, he might as well go hunting. Just as Ao and the Wu were talking, Xiao Xian suddenly opened his eyes. Just now, in the sea of consciousness, he saw the hands gradually disappear. He left that state and gradually regained his senses. He also felt more and more exhausted and sleepy. Chapter 269. When he opened his eyes, his consciousness was still a little blurry. It took him a while to focus. The shaman and the chief appeared above him. Xian, how are you? Ao asked. Xiao Xian struggled to sit up. He took a glass of water from the shaman and drank it. After a while, he said, I'm fine. You don't look like you're all right. Ao thought. After drinking a few more glasses of water, Xiao Xian felt that his strength had recovered a little. He told the shaman about what he found in the wooden house. He didn't mention his special ability, just his intuition. Ao was relieved. It was good that he wasn't attacked. That's it. The shaman took the wooden plate and the wooden cylinder with the gold powder. Yes. And the leaf? Xiao Xian asked. The shaman and Ao looked at each other and shook their heads. I'll call Gigu and ask him. No, I'll go to the wooden house myself. Ao said. Gigu wouldn't lie. If there was a leaf with a pattern drawn with gold powder, he would have brought it. But there wasn't. I'll go and have a look. Xiao Xian got up. He was a little weak, but he could walk. I'll go with you. The shaman said. The three people with the highest status in the Yanjiao tribe went out at the same time. Ta and Gigu called some people to guard them nervously. They were afraid that an assassin would appear. Recently, the tribe was really unsafe. They had been guarding against ferocious beasts, but now they found that humans were more troublesome than ferocious beasts. When they came to the wooden house again, Xiao Xian pointed to the place where he had the leaf. There was no leaf around. Did anyone else come in? Ao asked. Gigu shook his head. I don't think so. Recently, the people living around were busy drawing a line with the two people. How could they come in? As for the people who followed him, he believed that no one would hide anything. The shaman walked around the house, then stopped at the place where Xiao Xian had fainted. He squatted down and stretched out his arm, brushing the ground. The air generated by his palm blew the dust on the ground, but there was some dust that wasn't blown away. The leaf is gone. The shaman said. Gone. When I took it out, the leaves looked like they had just been picked. They were green. Xiao Xian was very surprised. But the shaman said it was gone, so it was gone. When they returned to the stone house, the shaman asked Xiao Xian to stay alone. Do you know the movements of your fingers before you woke up? The shaman asked. I don't. Xiao Xian shook his head. At that time, even if someone beat him to a pulp, he wouldn't feel it, much less the movement of a finger. You're tying a rope. The shaman's gaze was meaningful. Not. Yes. The shaman told Xiao Xian about the history of knots and knots. These were all mentioned in the precious records left by the ancestors. Although the shaman didn't know it very well, he could roughly guess it from those records. And the leaf you're holding is probably the longevity leaf. It's said that it will never rot even after being buried. The shaman said. Is there really a longevity leaf? Xiao Xian was doubtful. It's not a rumor. The shaman dipped his finger into the remaining gold powder on the wooden plate and said to Xiao Xian, these are also powder made by the longevity tree where the longevity leaf is. Xiao Xian didn't say anything. The shaman didn't care whether he believed it or not. He continued, it said that a long time ago, leaves and shells were also tools used by the ancestors to pass down their legacies. Precious plants such as the longevity leaf were the messengers to record important legacies. Xiao Xian, do you know that in the past, the shaman's legacies only had language and no words? Even if words and pictures are popular now, there are still many legacies that don't use words and pictures. For example, I'll pass on some of the abilities to Guizhe in the future. Such legacies, even if recorded with words and pictures, will be destroyed. They only exist once. When the receiver absorbs them, there will be no words for others to read in the world. Naturally, there won't be a second person who can obtain such legacies. You mean that the longevity leaf is the legacy of a certain shaman? Xiao Xian asked. Yes. Between different tribes, because of totems and fire seeds, legacies should be isolated and rejected. But why wasn't I rejected? Xiao Xian asked. He took a look at the leaf and fell down. And the one who completed his messenger's mission, the leaf that people said would never rot even after being buried, had already dispersed. The shaman couldn't answer. He didn't know many things and couldn't give an answer. So, I inherited the legacy of that leaf? I don't know what it was. I only saw a pair of hands holding a rope and tying knots. But they kept going around and never completed a knot. Xiao Xian described the scene in his sea of consciousness, hoping to get some hints from the shaman. The shaman stroked his beard. He had already pulled out 2 strands, but he still couldn't figure out what it was. Tomorrow, go to Guizhe's place and ask her to teach you the knots. The shaman said, before the appearance of words, knots were used to record things. After the appearance of words, stone bones and wood skin, the method of inheritance has always been changing. The ancient knots, in my opinion, are very mysterious. In ancient times, divination, contracts, memorials, and other things were all done using the knot method. How can a few knots represent so many things? Xiao Xian asked. But as soon as he said this, he wanted to slap himself. Stupid. Of course, things related to the shaman profession couldn't be explained by common sense. Even if they drew an egg, you couldn't think that it was really an egg, let alone a few knots. Originally, he thought that what he saw now was already ancient. He didn't expect that there was something even more ancient. However, Xiao Xian was really interested in knots. He wanted to understand what kind of message the leaf was trying to convey. The letters were all made of longevity leaves. How precious were the things that were sent on them. The next day, Xiao Xian went to Guizhe's medicine house. The shaman had already told Guizhe about it. When she saw Xiao Xian, Guizhe put down what she was doing and pointed to some animal skin rolls on the wooden table next to her. That's what the shaman gave you. Xiao Xian opened the animal skin roll and looked at it. There were some pictures of ropes and knots on it, and there were some annotations in the current text next to them. The animal skin roll was still new. It was only a few years ago when it was made. It should have been copied from the ancient books of the ancestors when Guizhe was learning the epilogue. Guizhe brought some straw ropes over. I made these last winter. You can try it with these. It's more convenient. Thanks. When you make more straw ropes, let me know. I'll help. Xiao Xian took out a straw rope and looked at it. These straw ropes were smooth and didn't have so many burrs. Each one was about the same length, about the size of a baby's little finger. The toughness was also very suitable. Guizhe sat down and also took out a straw rope. Then, according to each picture on the animal skin roll, he told Xiao Xian how to make a knot and what kind of knot meant. Sometimes, knots that looked very similar had very different meanings. This was probably the knotting method used to transmit hidden messages. Guizhe taught Xiao Xian some very simple knots, which were the same as the ones drawn on the animal skin roll. When he finished learning all the knots on the animal skin roll, Xiao Xian could even type out a sentence with the rope. Because it wasn't very difficult, and Xiao Xian had a good memory, after learning some skills, he let Guizhe do her work. There were still a lot of herbs in the medicine house that needed to be dealt with. He just had to look at it slowly and try it step by step. Guizhe saw that Xiao Xian's work was going well, so he went back to continue pounding the herbs. The alligator snapping turtle lying at the door moved its heavy body to another place. It closed its eyes and continued to bask in the sun. Time passed little by little, and the animal skin roll on the left side of Xiao Xian's hand was getting fewer and fewer. When he finally tried everything recorded in it, Xiao Xian could roughly understand some simple conclusions. As for more complicated knots, the shaman didn't give him any. Perhaps there were not many records about knots passed down in the tribe, so what the shaman could tell him was limited. There were still a lot of straw ropes brought by Guizhe. Xiao Xian thought for a while and observed the line drawing in his mind. Soon, he entered that state again and looked at the knots that appeared on his hands. Last time, he didn't understand anything. This time, Xiao Xian at least had some foundation. However, gradually, Xiao Xian realized that this was different from the conclusions he had just learned. Perhaps it wanted to express another meaning. According to the shaman, knots were used in many aspects in ancient times. If one method didn't work, there were other methods. There were knots for divination, knots for contracts, and so on. Since it didn't look like an ordinary record, could it be a divination or something else? Xiao Xian continued to observe the movements of the hands. When he got out of that state, he weakly moved his neck and felt that something was wrong with his hands. He looked down and found that his fingers were tied by the straw ropes. He didn't know how the ropes were tied, but all 10 of his fingers were tied by the straw ropes. Xiao Xian wanted to untie them, but he didn't know where to start. He could only slowly remove the straw ropes from his fingers. When all the straw ropes in his hands were removed, the straw ropes had been twisted into a ball and couldn't be untied. Xiao Xian tied the straw ropes into a big knot and threw it to the alligator snapping turtle. The alligator snapping turtle, who was basking in the sun, slowly opened its eyes and saw the straw rope next to it. It opened its mouth and bit it, slowly chewing. Xiao Xian paused and recalled the movements of the hands he had just seen. He took another straw rope and continued. Failure. Failure again. Failure again. The straw ropes were twisted into messy straw balls that couldn't be untied and thrown to the alligator snapping turtle. No matter how fast Xiao Xian tied the rope, the turtle still maintained its original slow speed of chewing the straw ropes. Therefore, as Xiao Xian's speed became faster and faster, the messy straw balls next to the alligator snapping turtle also became more and more. Guizhe, who was grinding medicine, glanced at Xiao Xian from time to time and thought, isn't Xiao Xian very smart? How can he tie all his fingers with a knot? Xiao Xian only stopped when there were only about 10 straw ropes left. Wiping the sweat on his face, Xiao Xian walked out of the medicine house, exhausted. He would continue tomorrow. He didn't believe that the message sent by the bansui leaf could only produce a messy straw ball. Chapter 270. After that, Xiao Xian didn't use the straw ropes provided by Guizhe anymore. It was too wasteful. He used ordinary straw ropes to practice knotting. Although they were rough and burly, he didn't feel bad if they were broken. If he couldn't untie them, he could just use them as firewood. For 5 days in a row, other than patrolling and hunting, Xiao Xian spent the rest of his time trying to knot ropes. Old Ku didn't understand why Xiao Xian was so obsessed with playing with straw ropes, but since Xiao Xian insisted, he didn't say anything. No matter how big or small the straw balls were, they were all used as firewood. After failing again, Xiao Xian was a little discouraged. He removed the straw balls that were tied to his fingers and threw them aside. He picked up a gourd filled with water and gulped down a few mouthfuls. It was just knotting a rope, but he was tired and sweaty. However, it was much better than a few days ago. He could go out and run for a while after a whole day. If it was the first 2 days, he could walk, let alone run. Xiao Xian took some time to go to the shaman's stone house and told him about his troubles with knotting ropes. It just feels wrong. Every time I play, my hands are tied. Xiao Xian said. The shaman was silent for a while and said, if that's the case, you don't have to think about it all the time. It's better to be casual. You don't have to be obsessed with imitating the movements of your hands. You can have your own ideas. Xiao Xian thought about it and agreed. Anyway, it was in his mind. If he couldn't figure it out now, he could try it later. What was the saying, when necessary, you have to learn to be simple-minded. Someone once said that simple-minded people were actually very smart, because they could always do something that others couldn't. Understanding the inheritance wasn't something that could be done overnight. It couldn't be rushed, and it would affect his mentality. I know. Xiao Xian thanked him seriously. Seeing Xiao Xian's reaction, the shaman nodded with satisfaction. Just as he was about to praise Xiao Xian, he heard Xiao Xian say, in 2 days, I plan to take a trip to the forest. It may be a little far, so I won't be back for 3 to 5 days. Cha-Cha seems to have found a good stone over there. I want to take a look. The shaman's heart skipped a beat. Just you. Now, the hunting team did not go on a long journey. Instead, they were exploring the area bit by bit. What they were looking for now was stability. At the same time, they could train the new batch of awakened warriors this year. However, since Xiao Xian said that he would be away for 3 to 5 days, the shaman was a little worried. If it were anyone else, the shaman wouldn't have reacted this way. However, the person in front of him was Xiao Xian. It was rare for an elder to light up the bone ornaments and inherit the will of the ancestors. The shaman was a little hesitant, but still nodded. All right, but be careful. Don't be impatient and don't advance rashly. The shaman warned. I know. Don't worry, Xiao Xian promised. Hearing these words, the shaman was so worried that he wanted to pull off all his beard. 2 days later, Xiao Xian left the tribe on Cha-Cha's back with the polished stone tools and food. After flying away from the tribe for a day, Xiao Xian walked directly in the forest. Cha-Cha needed to guard against other birds that suddenly appeared in the sky, and Xiao Xian didn't want to be a hindrance in the air. Walking in the strange forest, this was not the border area where the tribe first entered the forest. They were already deep in the forest. The surrounding environment was dangerous. With years of hunting experience and a better premonition than others, Xiao Xian was very sensitive to the hostile gazes around him. Even if they didn't have any murderous intent and only focused on Xiao Xian would be alerted as soon as they came within a certain range in the forest. The forest here was very humid, as if there was fog. The mountains in the distance were also hazy, faintly discernible. In this place, even a small beast or a small mountain was very dangerous. Further ahead, they walked into another forest. Tall and dense branches blocked the light from above. The place where Xiao Xian walked was very gloomy. Not far away, there was a hostile roar. He didn't know what kind of beast it was, but it was hiding behind the thick grass in the forest. It stared at Xiao Xian with its wild eyes, emitting a dark and ominous light. If it was the hunting ground on the other side of the river, the beasts would run away when they saw the hunters, because they knew that these people were not easy to deal with. They would be looking for death if they went up. However, in this strange forest, the beasts in the forest didn't know about human beings. They were alert to anything strange, but they also saw it as prey. Not only would they not run away, but they would also try to attack. A figure jumped out from behind the grass, accompanied by the low roar of the beast, announcing the start of the fight. The low roar of the beast became sharp and frightened. The sound stopped abruptly, the sound of the blade cutting the flesh, the splashing of the liquid, and the spreading smell of blood. When Xiao Xian withdrew the murderous look in his eyes and came out with the blood-stained blade, there were only the blood-stained beast corpses left in the forest. As soon as Xiao Xian left, less than 10 steps, some smaller beasts rushed out. They were not aiming at Xiao Xian, but at the beast corpse that had been cut in half. They screamed and scrambled for food. If they couldn't get it, they would bite each other. They didn't even look at Xiao Xian. However, not long after, as the pungent smell of blood spread, other beasts would come and drive away these smaller beasts and snatch the beast corpse. After flying and walking for a day, Xiao Xian looked at the sky. The sun was already hidden under the mountains, so he decided to find a place to rest. Cha-Cha fought with a ferocious beast with sharp claws living in a cave on the cliff. He drove the ferocious beast out of the cave, and then joined forces with Xiao Xian to make the ferocious beast their dinner. There were many beast bones piled up in the cave, with a rotten smell. There were also many insects of different sizes crawling around. Xiao Xian lit a torch to drive the insects away. As for the beast bones, Cha-Cha took them out of the cave. This could be a temporary resting place. If he came back in the future, he could come here to rest. Xiao Xian took out a piece of animal skin and drew a rough outline of the places along the way. Then he marked the location of the cave. This time, in addition to looking for the stone, he would also draw a simple map of the places along the way, so that it would be easier for the hunting team to explore and hunt. Xiao Xian applied some medicine to his wounds and Cha-Cha. Then he put out the fire and took the time to rest. When he woke up the next day, the sky was a little gloomy. He stood at the entrance of the cave and looked out. The forest below was moist. "It looks like it's going to rain," Xiao Xian said. Cha-Cha didn't like rain, so he planned to stay in the cave and wait for the weather to clear up before going out. He had been here many times, so he knew that the weather here changed quickly. It was raining now, but it might clear up soon. Xiao Xian ate the beast meat he had roasted yesterday for breakfast. The meat had become cold and hard, but he didn't care. He ate while looking at the sky outside. "I don't know when the rain will stop." Xiao Xian walked a little deeper into the cave, in case it would rain later. The wind here was very strong, and the rain might be blown in. Sitting in the cave, Xiao Xian saw the rope tied around his waist, and his hands itched. He hadn't touched a rope for 2 days. Since he had nothing to do, he took out the rope from the animal skin bag, cut a section with a knife, and played with it in his hands. The rope in the animal skin bag was a spare. As for the belt on his waist, of course, he couldn't take it off. Xiao Xian was about to tie the rope the way he used to, when he thought of the shaman's words, and he stopped. If he tied the rope the way he used to, the result would be the same. His hands would be tied, and he would end up with a messy bundle of grass. Xiao Xian sighed heavily, and closed his eyes. He threw away the memories of the past, and just twirled the rope around his hands aimlessly. Gradually, Xiao Xian lost interest in tying the rope. He wondered when the rain would start. Once it started raining in the forest, it would leave quickly. In this season, it wouldn't rain every day. However, if it didn't rain in this gloomy weather, wouldn't he have to keep waiting? As he thought about it, Xiao Xian seemed to see the pair of hands again, and the rope that was wrapped around the hands. The rope was moving quickly between the fingers. However, this time, the way the rope was tied was different. Xiao Xian didn't feel so chaotic, and it seemed to have a strong purpose. This time, Xiao Xian didn't divert his attention, but focused on the knotting movements of the hands. Xiao Xian's hands also unconsciously followed the movements, exactly the same as the knotting movements of the hands in his mind. After an unknown amount of time, Xiao Xian woke up from that state. When he opened his eyes and looked at his hands, he was shocked to find that there were several knots on the rope, and it wasn't tied up like a few days ago. Did he succeed? Or did he still fail? Xiao Xian guessed the meaning of the ropes and knots in his hands according to the basic conclusion he learned before. Just now, what was he thinking when he was tying the rope? Hunting? No, that wasn't it. Stone? No, even further back. Rain? Yes, rain. Thinking of this, Xiao Xian's expression became strange, but also a little excited. If the meaning of these conclusions was true, regardless of whether he succeeded or failed again, he had to verify it to know. Looking at the sky outside, Xiao Xian stood up and walked to the entrance of the cave. He took a deep breath, feeling the moist and cold water vapor in the air. He clenched his fist, stretched it out, and faced it. He silently counted the time. 5. He opened his fist and extended his little finger. 4. Extended his ring finger. 3. Extended his middle finger. 2. Extended his index finger. 1. Extended his thumb and opened his palm. Smack! There was a soft sound of liquid falling. His palm was slightly cold. Xiao Xian couldn't wait to look over, and then his smile froze. A pile of bird poop was lying quietly in the middle of his palm. Xiao Xian's face twitched. He planned to use something to wipe the bird poop off his palm. Just as he was about to retract his hand, another drop of liquid fell. It was followed by a second drop, a third drop, a fourth drop. Dense droplets of water fell from the sky, blown by the wind on the cliff wall, and some smashed into the cave. The forest at the foot of the mountain was instantly covered by a curtain of rain. The sound of dense raindrops hitting the leaves and the ground came from below. Chapter 271. It was raining. It was really raining. It was about the same time as Xiao Xian had predicted, only a few seconds apart. Was it a coincidence? Or was it really the same as what the knot had predicted? After washing the bird droppings off his hands with the rainwater, Xiao Xian walked back into the cave. He took out the straw rope from the animal skin bag and cut it again. Looking at the curtain of rain outside the cave, he wondered if he should try again. It was already raining, so what was the point of divination for the next one? Why don't I try when the rain will stop? Xiao Xian recalled the state he was in when he was tying the rope and his thoughts when he was tying the rope. Then he picked up the rope, closed his eyes, and threw away all distracting thoughts. He thought about when the rain would stop. Waiting for the hands to reappear in his mind, Xiao Xian observed for a while. He found that the knotting movements of the hands were different from the chaotic knots in the past. There was hope. Xiao Xian carefully observed the movements of the hands. In his own hands, the straw rope was knotted in the same way. When Xiao Xian left the state of consciousness, the feeling of exhaustion hit him again. His vision went dark for a moment, and his head hurt. It took a while for him to recover. It seemed that this method of knot divination was indeed very exhausting. Looking at the new conclusion in his hands, Xiao Xian interpreted it. He found that this time, it was not as detailed as before. The meaning was somewhat vague, but he could roughly guess. The rain would stop before noon. Even if there was no sun, Xiao Xian could roughly guess the time. He was used to days without clocks. Even if the sky was covered with dark clouds, he could guess the time by looking at the sky. This was a necessary skill for hunting in the mountains. It was only noon, so he would wait and see. Xiao Xian put the knot aside and ate a piece of cold and hard barbecue meat. He leaned against the cave wall to rest and recover his strength as soon as possible. When Xiao Xian felt that it was about time, the sound of the rain outside the cave had lessened, but it did not stop. Walking to the entrance of the cave, Xiao Xian looked outside. The thick clouds in the sky were dispersing, and Yang Guang shone through the gaps between the clouds, illuminating the forest full of vitality. The sound of the rain gradually lessened until it completely stopped. In the sky, the dark clouds dispersed. Yang Guang was just in time. Once was a coincidence, and twice was also a coincidence. Xiao Xian was even more convinced that the inheritance recorded on the longevity leaf was not divination. Xiao Xian rarely saw such a method ever since knots were gradually replaced. Even when he was on a long journey, he had never seen such a method. He didn't expect to obtain such a thing. The only thing he didn't know was which shaman from which tribe had left this behind. There wasn't even a trace of the tribe's totem. After the rain, the sky cleared. Cha-Cha flew out and caught a small ferocious beast. She then shared it with Xiao Xian. After eating, Cha-Cha rested beside him, while Xiao Xian stayed in the cave. He had almost recovered his strength. Looking at the remaining straw ropes in the animal skin bag, he thought for a while and cut off another section with his stone knife. Not in a hurry to leave, Xiao Xian planned to try the knots for the third time. He had finally succeeded, so he wanted to study it more. He wanted to predict what he might encounter next, but the third time was not so smooth. He still tied the knots to his fingers. Again. Failure. Again. Again. Failure again. Half of the straw ropes in the animal skin bag had been used up. Xiao Xian put down the knots in his hands and leaned against the wall to rest. Why did he fail? Was it too difficult? Cha-Cha was beside him, watching Xiao Xian make straw balls one after another. Then he leaned against the wall and banged his head against it. It didn't quite understand Xiao Xian's thoughts. It only felt that humans were really complicated animals. After his strength recovered, Xiao Xian thought that maybe the divination just now was too difficult. He couldn't do it, so he decided to do something easier. If he couldn't even do something easy, then he wouldn't try again today. He couldn't force it. Maybe it was a problem with his condition. He would try again when he was in a better condition. Picking up another section of straw rope, Xiao Xian thought about where he should go next. When the knots were finally done, Xiao Xian breathed a sigh of relief. Was the previous one still too difficult? He would have succeeded if he changed to something easier. He shouldn't bite off more than he could chew. It was better to take it step by step. The next place to go was naturally the place where Cha-Cha told him about the stone. This wasn't too difficult. However, when Xiao Xian deciphered the meaning of the knot and compared it with the direction given by Cha-Cha, he found that the two directions were not the same. The knot was successful, so it shouldn't be done randomly. Then, was the direction given by the divination more meaningful to Xiao Xian? In order to figure it out, Xiao Xian made some adjustments and tried again with another section of straw rope. The result was the same as before. Xiao Xian looked at the direction indicated by the knot and pondered. What was more important than the stone there? After thinking for a while, Xiao Xian made a decision. Cha-Cha, let's not look for the stone first. Let's go there. Xiao Xian pointed in a different direction. Cha-Cha had never been to the direction pointed by Xiao Xian, but it didn't matter. It was quite excited to go to an unfamiliar forest. Because the knot had consumed a lot of energy and time, Xiao Xian decided to set off tomorrow. At the same time, he took some time out of the cave to find some suitable vines to use as rope, in case he didn't have enough straw rope. He had used so much straw rope to tie the knot, so he had to prepare some more in case of an emergency. The next day, Xiao Xian, who had recovered, left the cave with Cha-Cha and headed in the direction indicated by the knot. There was a river flowing through the forest. The river water was a little green, and there were some animals moving around occasionally. Xiao Xian didn't walk by the river. It was dangerous there. He was at least 20 to 30 meters away from the river. There were some shiny things on the gravel beach by the river. Xiao Xian wanted to pick one up to take a look. However, when he bent down to pick it up, he suddenly heard a whistling sound. Xiao Xian had been on guard against his surroundings. When he heard the sound, he turned his body and dodged to the side. Bang! Where Xiao Xian was standing, a water arrow passed through and hit a big rock, splashing water everywhere. Water arrow? Xiao Xian's eyelids twitched. Where did this water arrow come from? Was it a fish by the river? Before Xiao Xian could think, another water arrow shot out from the river. Although it was made of water, it was strong and fast. Xiao Xian dodged the second water arrow. It hit a tree about 50 meters away from the river bank, leaving a hole in the trunk. Following that, the third and fourth water arrows chased after Xiao Xian. However, because of these continuous arrows, Xiao Xian also saw the source of the water arrows. It was indeed from the river. There was a bulge floating on the surface of the river. It was part of some kind of creature in the water. Xiao Xian didn't want to waste any more time here. After dodging the water arrows, he left the river bank. The deeper he went into the forest, the more he couldn't underestimate even a fish in the river. Big fish had their own threats, and small shrimps had their own abilities. If he wasn't careful, he would stay here forever. However, Xiao Xian didn't understand what was so special in the depths of the forest where danger lurked everywhere. Chapter 272. In order to reach the direction indicated by the knot, they had to cross the river. Xiao Xian walked along the river for some distance, but did not find a place to cross directly. So he asked Cha-Cha to give him a lift. While grabbing Cha-Cha's claws, Xiao Xian saw a hunting scene by the river. A gibbon-like animal with long and sharp claws was attracted by the shiny objects by the river bank. It wanted to dig them out and take a look, but a water arrow suddenly shot at it. However, the animal's reaction was fast. It stopped digging and quickly dodged. 2 consecutive arrows did not hit the target. Perhaps it was because it had lost Xiao Xian, the fish in the water was a little anxious. More of its head that was hidden under the water appeared, and some fan-shaped scales could be seen. Another 3 water arrows were shot out. The first 2 water arrows blocked the escape route of the prey on the shore. When the prey hurriedly turned around, the third water arrow hit the target. The prey on the shore was hit and staggered, but it only paused for a moment. The next water arrows arrived one after another. A sharp and mournful cry rang out in the forest as if it was going to pierce through one's eardrums. However, its cry only scared off a few timid birds. The other creatures in the forest did not move because of its cry. Except for the fish in the water. The fish's body was about 6 or 7 meters long. It looked big and heavy. Suddenly, it jumped out of the water and landed on the river bank. Its developed pectoral and pelvic fins were like 4 legs. After it landed on the shore, it bounced up again. It opened its big mouth with sharp teeth and bit down on the prey that was slowed down by the continuous water arrows. Xiao Xian could clearly hear the crisp sound of bones. The prey's eyes were filled with fear and disbelief. The strange fish that had bitten the prey contracted its pectoral and pelvic fins, biting the struggling prey tightly. Its slightly cylindrical body rolled from the river bank into the river. The panicked screams disappeared in an instant, leaving only bubbles on the surface of the water. Everything by the river bank returned to its previous tranquility. Only some bubbles and not too obvious blood floated up from the river. This was the fearsome beast mountain forest that all the tribes were afraid of. Under the seemingly peaceful surface, there were hidden dangers. Even from afar, it gave people a great sense of pressure. Xiao Xian withdrew his gaze. After crossing the river, he returned to the ground and continued to deal with the various kinds of dangers in the forest. He continued to advance in the direction indicated by the knot. While Xiao Xian was moving towards his target in the forest, the shaman was counting the days in the tribe. 6 days had passed. He didn't know when Xiao Xian would return. Whenever she thought of Xiao Xian, she would feel a headache and worry. Just as he was worrying, Ao quickly walked in from outside. What happened? The shaman asked. After hearing Ao's words, the shaman knew that it was not about Xiao Xian, but something else. He was slightly relieved, but what Ao said had to be treated seriously. The people of the Lu tribe told them that there would be a special expedition team coming. The team consisted of people from some big tribes in the central region. This new matter distracted the tribesmen, so the shaman didn't have time to count how long Xiao Xian had been gone. After 3 days of arduous travel, Xiao Xian finally arrived at the place indicated by the knot. Although there was no sign or stone to indicate that this was the place he was looking for, Xiao Xian felt that this was the place. Looking around, he was surrounded by mountains. It was a part of the mountain range. The peaks of the mountains reached into the clouds, and white snow could be seen. As he approached, Xiao Xian felt that there was something in the mountains that was attracting him. Vigilant of his surroundings, Xiao Xian walked step by step towards the place that attracted him. He didn't know where it was, nor what he was looking for. He just felt that he had to find it. The higher he went, the steeper the mountains became. The trees became sparse, and the attraction got closer and closer. Finally, Xiao Xian came to the entrance of a cave. Looking at the boulder in front of the cave, Xiao Xian put his knife back into the leather sheath at his waist. He took a deep breath, hugged the boulder, and moved it out. With a dull grinding sound, the boulder was moved out of the way little by little. This place was close to the top of the mountain. Although there was no snow, the temperature was much lower than at the foot of the mountain. However, it was as if someone had lit a fire in the cave. As the boulder was moved out of the way, Xiao Xian could feel the warm air blowing against his face. It was a warm air with a stale smell. The only difference was that the inside of the cave was pitch black, and there was no sign of fire. There was a strange force here that repelled the intruders. It was as if the intruders persisted, that strange force would tear apart everything that forcibly invaded like the rotating blades of a blender. However, this strange force gave Xiao Xian a familiar feeling. Cha-Cha hovered in the sky, unwilling to come down. It would rather die than come closer. Xiao Xian did not force it. After moving the boulder, Xiao Xian went to find some dry wood, lit a torch, and walked in step by step. He did not know how long this cave had existed. There were some things at the entrance that could no longer be seen clearly. With a touch, they would turn into mud or shatter. Inside. It was inside. With the torch in hand, Xiao Xian walked into the depths of the cave. Not long after, he saw several people. To be exact, there were 6 standing corpses that had been dead for an unknown period of time. When he did not see them clearly, Xiao Xian thought that they were people blocking his way. After taking a closer look, he realized that they were 6 brown, dried corpses that looked like they were just skin and bones. Their hair was still there. Although the animal skins on their bodies were no longer shiny and were covered in a layer of dust, they were not as flexible as they used to be. They could be easily cut with a knife. The 6 of them completely blocked Xiao Xian's path forward. These 6 people no longer looked like they used to. There were no eyeballs in their sunken eye sockets, but they seemed to be seriously looking at something. Although they were expressionless, they gave off an inexplicable feeling of determination and fortitude. It was as if no one, no matter what, could move them. The closer he got, the more Xiao Xian could feel the power that seemed to want to tear everything apart. His chest churned, and a burning pain spread throughout his body. Xiao Xian had no choice but to use his totemic power to resist. However, the strange thing was that when Xiao Xian used his totemic power and totemic patterns appeared on his body, the strong resistance became gentle and no longer repelled. Instead, it made Xiao Xian feel closer. The strange power that was blocking him was gone. People from the Yanjiao tribe? If they were really from the Yanjiao tribe, then they must be the ancestors from 1,000 years ago, right? Since he was an ancestor, according to the tribe's tradition, they had to bow to their ancestors. Xiao Xian now had the blood of the Flaming Horns flowing in his body. As a member of the Flaming Horns tribe, he naturally had to bow. Xiao Xian put the torch aside and bowed to the 6 people in front of him with the ancestors' etiquette. Bang! The 6 corpses fell. Looking at the fallen corpses, Xiao Xian was stunned. He wondered if he had bowed to the ancestors, but then he thought about it and realized that was not right. Before, these 6 people had blocked the way forward, but now that they had fallen, there was still a passage left. It was not very wide, but it was just enough for Xiao Xian to walk through. Picking up the torch and being careful not to step on the ancestors, Xiao Xian continued to walk in. After walking for about 20 meters, Xiao Xian saw a person sitting cross-legged on the ground. Or rather, it was a mummy similar to the 6 people in front of him. However, this mummy was more complete. Other than being slightly shriveled, its face was still clear. Probably because it was too old, there were more wrinkles on its face. Looking at its clothes, it didn't look like a warrior, but rather like the old shaman. Shaman? Whether it was or not, he had to bow to the ancestors first. Xiao Xian bowed again seriously. Then, he felt the strange power from before dissipate like the wind. The temperature in the cave suddenly dropped, as if the torch had been extinguished and the heater was gone. Xiao Xian looked past the person sitting cross-legged on the ground. Behind this person were wooden and stone boxes that had accumulated a layer of dust. Chapter 273. Why did the ancestors of the tribe place so many boxes here? It wasn't just a day or 2 away from the tribe. If there weren't any dangers in the forest, it wouldn't be a long distance. However, there were many dangers in between. Xiao Xian knew that even if it was 1,000 years ago, there wouldn't be much difference. Xiao Xian walked over with a torch. The boxes were tied with some straw ropes, probably to prevent the lids from falling off during transportation. However, if one took a closer look, it was obvious that some of the boxes were tied up in a more complicated way. Even the straw ropes used to tie them were different. The straw ropes were tied into knots and painted with different colors. The knot in the middle was the symbol of a shaman. As for the other boxes, the straw ropes used were relatively ordinary. However, it couldn't be said that the things in these boxes weren't important. Since the ancestors moved them here, they must have important preservation value. Xiao Xian planned to take a look at the special boxes with knots. However, he found that the knots were very difficult to untie. The ropes were also very strong. It didn't seem like they had been there for a long time. Cut them off. Burn them off. Forget it. If the people in the tribe knew about this, they would definitely have opinions and think that he was disrespectful to the ancestors. Putting the boxes with complicated knots aside, Xiao Xian turned to look at the other boxes that were tied with more ordinary methods. He raised his hand to untie the knots, but Xiao Xian only touched them with his hand. The straw ropes that tied the boxes broke and shattered into powder. He pinched the other parts of the straw ropes and found that they were the same. Perhaps because too much time had passed, the straw ropes had lost their original tenacity and were no longer strong. The previous boxes had a higher density, so the ropes used were different. Now that the density was lower, Xiao Xian didn't feel pressured to look at the things in the boxes. Opening the boxes, Xiao Xian saw many animal skin rolls neatly placed inside. Xiao Xian picked up one and unfolded it. This map recorded some things that happened in the Yanjiao tribes in a certain year, such as harvests, disputes, and so on. Picking up another one, it recorded the various wars between the Flaming Horns tribe and other tribes. It also involved several tribes that Xiao Xian was familiar with, such as the Thousand Masks tribe, the Eight Limbs tribe, etc. Xiao Xian knew of several large tribes in the central region, basically all of them were recorded. Did the Yanjiao tribe attract so much hatred in the past? But soon, Xiao Xian found that his guess was wrong. It wasn't that Yanjiao attracted hatred, but that everyone in that era was particularly easy to attract hatred. According to the records in these scrolls, the tribes were not as peaceful as they were now. Perhaps for the wanderers, the life outside was already very difficult, especially in the resting areas around the bazaar. The traveling teams of various tribes fought with each other every day, and then the fishes in the moat would be implicated. However, it was nothing compared to what was written on the animal skin scroll. Now it was at most a conflict between traveling teams, but what was recorded on the animal skin scroll was a large-scale conflict between tribes. A small fight every 3 days, a big fight every 10 days. It was as common as eating. Not pleasing to the eye. Fight. Fancy someone. Rob. See something good. Rob again. Everything depended on strength. If you could beat them, rob them directly. If you couldn't beat them, rob them secretly. If you couldn't rob them secretly, then you could only give up. If you didn't give up, then you would be beaten and killed. It could be said that in the past, the survival of small tribes was extremely difficult. According to the records, many small tribes were destroyed. The central region was even more chaotic. Because there were many big tribes, there were wars every 2 or 3 days. Today you raided my team, tomorrow I will destroy your whole team. Even the Mang tribe and the Eight Limbs tribe, which Xiao Xian always thought were good neighbors and close partners, used to be like enemies. Not to mention a bamboo of the Mang tribe on the border of the Eight Limbs tribe, even if there was a green onion that didn't belong to their tribe, the people of the Eight Limbs tribe would pull it out by the roots. And all the spiders and other things that entered the Mang tribe, as long as they were found and didn't come out again, they were either killed or eaten. Spiders were not delicious. No problem, as long as the people of the Eight Limbs tribe were unhappy, they would eat happily. Among them, there was a scroll written by an unknown shaman. It wasn't so solemn, but had a lot of bad taste. It also wrote a lot of scandals of other tribes, such as whose family was robbed, who was cuckolded, who was pushed down from the position of chief by his own brother. The words were slightly exaggerated, revealing gossip and excitement. Not all shamans were as serious as the old man now. The enmity of a family could easily become the enmity of a tribe. For that era, war came too easily. And the physique and strength of the Yanjiao people made a lot of people gnash their teeth in anger, giving others the impression that they were all kinds of rude and unreasonable. But Xiao Xian could see the complacency and pride of the person who wrote these records from these words. No matter who wrote these records, most of them were like this. As one of the strongest tribes in the past, Yanjiao did have the right to be complacent and unreasonable. It was hard to imagine that the chaotic environment in the past had become much more stable now. Although it was still full of all kinds of barbaric violence and killing, compared with what was recorded in these animal skin scrolls, it was really a world of difference. Why did the tribes that didn't like each other in the past coexist peacefully now? When Xiao Xian was with the traveling team, he also inquired about it, but he didn't know much about it. Anyway, in the past 200 or 300 years, there were no big wars. Except for the Wanchur tribe, which always harassed the small tribes, the other big tribes in the central area didn't really fight with each other. Speaking of the Wanchur tribe, Xiao Xian only saw the name of the Wanchur tribe in 2 animal skin scrolls, and the recorded shaman predicted that the tribe would disappear in 500 years. But in fact, this tribe, which was more unreasonable and brutal than the Yanjiao tribe in the past, had survived until today, and had become one of the big tribes in the central area. Between the big tribes, they abandoned their former enmity and put down their hatred. Although they didn't coexist peacefully, at least they seemed to have a cooperative relationship. Xiao Xian could only think of one most likely reason for such a change: they had a common enemy, and this enemy made them afraid. One or two tribes alone were not enough, they had to band together. The Yanjiao tribe? No, even if the Yanjiao tribe used to be strong, it wasn't strong enough to make these tribes band together for such a long time. Another thing that Xiao Xian felt strange was that there was no record of slave owners. At that time, there were captives, and those who were defeated would be dragged back to work. But there was no record of slave owners, not even one. In addition to these, Xiao Xian went through several other boxes with weak straw ropes, and learned a lot of information. It wasn't all about the wars between the tribes, but included all aspects, such as records of farming and animal husbandry. Thousands of years ago, the Yanjiao tribe also mainly hunted. After all, it was close to the mountains, and most of the food was taken directly from the mountains. But there were also plantations, just like the murals that Xiao Xian saw. There were records of plantations, breeding, harvesting. These records were all in the books. Maybe now the shaman of the tribe also had some of these records, but Xiao Xian believed that the records here were much more detailed than those in the shaman's hands. Thinking about it, when the ancestors of the Yanjiao tribe left the old haunt, they were mainly fleeing for their lives. Naturally, they didn't bring many records of plantations and breeding with them. Maybe they didn't even bring them with them when they left, because when the ancestors left, they didn't expect to be gone for so long. The records in the shaman's hands were probably written by the people who left later on based on their own experiences. There were too many animal skin rolls in the box.
It was inconvenient for Xiao Xian to read them with a torch inside, and he was worried that the torch would damage the animal skin rolls. So he moved the box to the entrance of the cave, and opened them one by one under the light of the cave. Xiao Xian didn't doubt the authenticity of these records. It was the shaman who recorded them. On some animal skin rolls that recorded important events, there were some seemingly meaningless words at the beginning, but these were actually the language of the shaman. Whether something needed to be recorded or not, if there was a conflict within the tribe, the right to decide was given to the fire seed and the totem. These seemingly meaningless words were actually a kind of solemn words, indicating that these were decided by everyone together or through sacrifice, and there was no falsehood. In addition to farming, fishing, hunting, and animal husbandry, there were also handcrafts, astronomical phenomena, construction, medicine, war, political life, and so on. Although many of the records were vague and not detailed, and it could be seen that the tribe wasn't proficient in them at that time. For example, there were many limited records on astronomical phenomena and handcrafts, and they could only be regarded as immature. But Xiao Xian was still shocked to see so many records. What was the most important thing for the Yanjiao tribe? Fire crystals. Various kinds of crystal shellfish as property. Or other precious stones. No, none of them. In fact, all of these were at the bottom of the list. The more Xiao Xian knew, the more he understood what was important to the shaman of this tribe. In the tribe, the most important thing was to figure out their own members, origins, totems, and so on. Secondly, they had to set the rules of the tribe, important marriage and funerals, the establishment of a leader, meetings, and so on. The important things were production, war, sacrifice, and so on. These were undoubtedly the contents that the shaman needed to record and pass on to future generations. And these contents, in layman's terms, were what people called history. In the eyes of the shaman, the longer the history, and the longer the tribe existed, the more it could prove the strength of the tribe. As for why the Yanjiao's history was kept here, perhaps it was because they couldn't take it away, and they were afraid that it would be put in danger in the old haunt, so they had people bring it here and hide it. After all, few other tribes dared to directly rush into the ferocious beast's mountain forest. The people in the cave had been dead for a long time, and the only thing left was the power that Xiao Xian had felt before. For the invaders, it was a destructive force, but for this cave, it was like a guardian. It had not changed for thousands of years, quietly guarding here, guarding Yanjiao's history, and waiting for future generations to come back.
However, to Xiao Xian's regret, there was no detailed record of the fire seed among the books he had seen. Perhaps, the older things were sealed in those unopened boxes. Forget it, when he brought them back and let the shaman open them, he would ask the shaman. As long as it was not a secret, the shaman would let him see it. Xiao Xian wondered if he should take these boxes and the 7 ancestors back now, and then say to the people in the tribe, "Look, I found the ancestors again." Chapter 274. Could these things in the box be eaten? No. But these were extremely precious spiritual food for the tribe. The shaman would rather starve to death than throw them away. Just like the people who were willing to die here. After careful consideration, Xiao Xian decided to leave these things here for the time being. When he went back, he would call some people to bring back the ancestor's body and the important history of the tribe. There were too many things, too precious. Xiao Xian alone and Cha-Cha could not guarantee that they could bring all these things back in good condition. If they encountered some troublesome ferocious beasts, not to mention bringing people and boxes back, they might even lose them. This risk could not be taken. The strange power that existed in the cave before had disappeared. Perhaps it would not appear again. Its guarding task had been completed. In order to prevent other creatures from destroying the ancestor's body and the precious history, after the power disappeared, Xiao Xian set some traps at the entrance of the cave before leaving. He also went to the forest to find a lot of insect-repellent plants and sprinkled them in the cave. For these insect-repellent plants, Xiao Xian even fought with a giant bear. His arm bone was almost broken. That giant bear was much bigger than the 2 he saw in the old haunt. Sure enough, the deeper they went into the forest, the stronger the ferocious beasts. After dealing with the things in the cave, Xiao Xian left and went in the direction that Cha-Cha told him. The original goal of this trip was to find the stone that Cha-Cha found. He did not expect to have an unexpected harvest. It was not a waste of a long trip. More than half of the stone found by Cha-Cha was embedded in the mountain wall. Its color was a little different from the surrounding stone, and its hardness was also very different. There were scratches and marks caused by various animals or other natural phenomena on the surrounding stone walls, but there were very few on this stone. Good, very good. Xiao Xian spent some time to dig out the stone. The hardness of the stone was good. It was at least a high-quality stone. It was big enough. Standing on the ground, it was estimated to be nearly 2 meters high and 1 meter wide. It was oblong. Xiao Xian tested it. The deeper he went, the harder the stone became. Although it wasn't easy to find high-quality stones, they weren't rare either. However, Xiao Xian was interested in better stones. Perhaps the core of this stone could reach the highest grade. He was out of stock, so he had to prepare more good stones to bring back and grind them into tools. Xiao Xian was heavier than a normal rock, but with the Yanjiao people's superior strength, he could carry the rock and even jog for a while. However, his speed was greatly reduced in the forest. Sometimes, Xiao Xian would have to throw the stone down first and find an opportunity to carry it away. Carrying the stone back was indeed a difficult experience, but it was worth it to be able to find such a stone. Because carrying one more stone consumed a lot of energy, and he had to save enough energy to deal with all kinds of creatures that might attack him, Xiao Xian didn't have time to study knot divination this time. He wasn't used to carrying a heavy stone for the first few days, but gradually he got used to it. Sometimes he could even use the stone as a shield to block the attacks of those ferocious beasts. Now the weight he could carry was getting heavier and heavier. In this way, he walked and stopped. When Xiao Xian returned to the tribe, it had been 29 days since he left the tribe. Xiao Xian didn't expect to be away for so long. He said that this trip wouldn't take 3 or 5 days, but he didn't expect it to take nearly 30 days. Jiao, Cha-Cha flew down from the air and called a few times to Xiao Xian. There are outsiders in the tribe? Xiao Xian was puzzled. Could it be the Wanshu tribe? But now it didn't look like a war. Xiao Xian made a gesture to let Cha-Cha continue to pay attention to the situation in the air. After a short rest, he carried the stone with one arm and the dead prey with the other hand, and walked back to the tribe. The prey was a python, nearly 20 meters long. Xiao Xian encountered it when he woke up in the morning to look for food. He was almost attacked by it, and it took him some effort and time to deal with it. Thinking that he should be able to return to the tribe before dark, he didn't throw the python away, but dragged it back by its tail. There were many snakes bigger than this one in the forest. Xiao Xian had seen several snakes over 30 or 40 meters long, but Xiao Xian always avoided them. He wouldn't provoke them before he was fully prepared. When he came to the border, he met the warriors guarding here. Xian, you're back. You got a good harvest this time. A warrior said when he saw Xiao Xian carrying and dragging. It's okay. How's the tribe? Did anyone come? Xiao Xian asked. Oh, you've been away for too long, so you don't know. The warrior thought of something and lowered his voice, saying, some people came. I heard that they are from the big tribes in the central region. The people who went hunting recently didn't go out. No wonder I didn't meet them along the way. They didn't go out hunting. Xiao Xian understood and asked about the people from the central region. I don't know why. You have to ask the shaman and the chief. But I don't like those people. They are so arrogant. The man curled his lips and said. After listening to them, Xiao Xian walked back to the tribe. Now the sun was about to set. He had to go back in time for dinner. After eating in the morning, he didn't stop except for 2 short breaks. The tribe looked a little different from when he left. The leaves of the trees became denser. There were some farmlands not far away. The seedlings in the fields had grown a lot taller. When he left, they just showed their tips. Because he was carrying the stone and dragging the prey, Xiao Xian didn't go directly to a crowded place. He took a little detour. At this time, many people who came out to work had already gone back, so there weren't many people in the places where Xiao Xian passed. As he walked, Xiao Xian heard someone talking in front of him. The voice was very strange. There was more than one. Alas, that's why I said, this Flaming Horns tribe, in fact, is not as exaggerated as other people say. Chu Su and Su also said that they are very powerful. I don't think so. That's right. When I heard those rumors before, I thought that they were all monsters. I was disappointed when I saw them. A soft female voice said. There's nothing special about them except that they are a little stronger. So what if they are a little stronger? Do you think you can kill people by throwing stones at them? The man couldn't help but laugh. Others also thought that this was funny and laughed. The man continued, how do you think they can fight when they're carrying rocks? Like this? Like this? Or like this? Well, I've seen this before, ha ha ha. However, he soon found that everyone's laughter had stopped, and the atmosphere was a little strange. He heard a sound approaching behind him, but he didn't care. So what if the people of the Yanjiao tribe heard him? At worst, he would fight. He wasn't afraid. However, everyone's faces were stiff, as if they had seen something incredible. There was also a person who had a good relationship with him winking at him and motioning him to look behind him. The setting sun fell diagonally in front of him. He couldn't see who the person behind him was from the shadow. Just as he was thinking about whether to turn around and take a look, he heard a voice behind him. Hey, you're in the way. Xiao Xian looked at the person in front of the road with feathers of various colors on his head. He was standing there like a monkey holding a watermelon. He thought, where did this idiot come from? The person in front of him turned around and the first thing he saw was a big stone. The pressure was so great that he couldn't help but move to the side. Xiao Xian didn't say much. He carried the stone and dragged the snake home. He glanced at the people present and didn't find anyone he knew, so he didn't look at them anymore. If he wanted to fight, he could wait until he was full. In any case, these people wouldn't leave for a while. He was hungry now and was considering whether he should roast or boil the snake when he got home. Looking at the person who left as if nothing had happened, the young people who stood there were silent for a long time. Then one of them asked, "Who was that person just now?" The others didn't answer. They didn't know either. At this moment, they only had one thought: damn, that person just now looked about the same age as us, but he was so strong. It was as if he wasn't carrying a big stone, but a bucket, and he wasn't dragging a big python, but a dead fish. His footsteps were quite light. Chapter 275. When Xiao Xian returned home with the snake's tail and the stone, old Ku was cooking meat soup. While cooking, he complained to Caesar, who was lying outside the window. Seeing Xiao Xian come back, old Ku threw everything aside and went to help Xiao Xian take the snake. "This snake is quite big. Where did you hunt it?" Old Ku looked at the snake in front of the house, went into the house, took out his tools, and planned to cut it. "Not far from the tribe. I just killed it and dragged it back. This stone is the one Cha-Cha found. It's good, right?" Xiao Xian moved his shoulders. His shoulders hurt from carrying the stone for too long. Old Ku touched it with a small stone knife and nodded, "It's really good. It's worth your time. Oh, you should go to the shaman's place. I'll take care of this snake." "Okay, I also have something to tell him." "Wait. I almost forgot. Don't go to the stone house near the fire pit. The shaman is not there. He and the chief are in the big house over there. They are talking with the people from the central tribes. They haven't come back yet. You can go there directly." Xiao Xian looked towards the direction old Ku was pointing at. There was a relatively magnificent stone house, located at the border of the core area. There were no other houses around it. Basically, there was only one house, which was very eye-catching. The shaman asked everyone to build it after he knew that people were coming. He and the chief have been talking with the outsiders these days. Old Ku explained. "Okay, I'll go there and have a look." The ground was paved with stones. Even if it was raining, people would not step on the mud on the ground. This was not there before Xiao Xian left. There were many warriors around the big stone house. Most of them were from the Yanjiao tribe, but there were also warriors from other tribes. These foreign warriors were not all from the same tribe. Even those with poor eyesight could tell that they came from at least 3 different tribes. The style of clothing was too obvious. The clothing of each tribe was related to the tribe's totem and customs. For example, the people of the Mang tribe liked to wear green. Some of them were light green, while others were dark green. The material of their clothing was similar to linen, and there were jade stones hanging from their bodies. Judging from the jade, these people were at least intermediate totem warriors. The clothes of the people of the 8 Limbs tribe had a silky texture, which was the specialty of their tribe. Some warriors even had spiders of different sizes crawling on their bodies. There was also a tribe with feathers on their heads. They were similar to the people that Xiao Xian had encountered before. Their faces were also painted with various colors, making it impossible to see their original appearance. The Feather Tribe? When Xiao Xian was observing these people, he found that they did not care about Xiao Xian at first. However, there were 2 people that Xiao Xian had seen before. Su and Chu Su both looked at Xiao Xian. They had a deep impression of Xiao Xian, especially when they saw Xiao Xian beat 4 people by himself. Now they could not help trembling when they thought about it. As for the other Yanjiao tribe warriors who were guarding outside, they unconsciously smiled when they saw Xiao Xian. "Are you here for the shaman?" a warrior asked. "Yes." "Why don't you go and ask if I can go in first?" Xiao Xian said. One of the warriors who often acted as the shaman's guard was familiar with Xiao Xian. He did not think that the shaman would stop Xiao Xian from entering the house. However, the situation inside was complicated, so it was better to ask. Not long after the man entered the house, he came out and motioned for Xiao Xian to go in directly. Seeing Xiao Xian walk in, a few people from the other tribes were unhappy. There were several important people inside. How could a small fry like Xiao Xian be allowed to enter? Who is the guy who just went in? Why can he go in? Someone asked. He is Xiao Xian. Chu Su said. The man who was about to say something turned to look at Chu Su and Su. He is that Xiao Xian. Yanjiao Xiao Xian had been known by some people before the Yanjiao tribe came back. However, when they looked for him later, they could not find him until the whole Yanjiao tribe appeared. Several Yanjiao warriors looked at the people opposite with ridicule and said, "Why can he go in?" Because he is the elder of our tribe. So far, he is the only elder. His position is second only to the shaman and the chief. Why can't he go in? The Yanjiao warriors had long been dissatisfied with those people from the other tribes who always had a sense of superiority. Why, now these people were still dissatisfied with the elders of the tribe. As long as you dare to say, "We dare to fight." Seeing that the situation was not good, an older warrior pulled the people in front of him. That's enough. We are not here to quarrel. Be careful of the team leaders. Xiao Xian did not know that there were sparks outside the stone house again and a fight almost broke out. After he went in, he saw 4 people from the other tribes, 3 sitting and 1 standing behind. Among the 3 sitting people, Xiao Xian had seen one of them before. He was Huang Yi, a senior totem warrior of the Mang tribe with a 3-horned jade. Huang Yi looked at Xiao Xian carefully. When he saw Xiao Xian for the first time, he did not take Xiao Xian seriously. He only thought that Xiao Xian was an insignificant person in a small tribe until Chu Su told him about the Yanjiao tribe. Xiao Xian did not care about the 4 people's eyes and went straight to them. When the shaman saw Xiao Xian, a smile appeared on his expressionless face. He waved his hand and signaled Gigu, who was standing behind him, to bring a chair over. Here, except for the shaman and the chief, who were sitting, Gigu and Ta were standing. However, after Xiao Xian came, he became the 3rd person from the Yanjiao tribe to sit. Seeing this, the eyelids of the 3 people sitting across the table twitched at the same time. On the side of the Flaming Horns tribe, those who could sit here naturally had a very high status in the tribe. Even the 2 team leaders couldn't sit here, but this young man dared to sit here without any change in his expression, and the others didn't show any signs of objection. Obviously, Xiao Xian's status was even higher than the 2 team leaders. How old was he? He was not even a senior totem warrior. Let me introduce you. This is Xiao Xian, the elder of the Yanjiao tribe. Xiao Xian said. As the only non-senior totem warrior in the room, this person was not afraid at all. Surrounded by the momentum of a senior totem warrior, he was very natural. Huang Yi was very confused about the word elder, but now was not the time to ask in detail. He might not get the answer even if he asked. Mang Lin, Huang Yi. Huang Yi said. Wei Ba, Qiu Gu. The person next to Huang Yi said. That person looked about the same age as Huang Yi, but with a smiling face. He was not as serious as Huang Yi. Gu Ji of the Feather Tribe. The 3rd person said. Because there was too much paint on his face, his original face could not be seen. I just came back from the forest. I'm very sorry to disturb your discussion. Xiao Xian said. However, although he said so, he didn't look sorry at all. Huang Yi was about to say something, but the shaman said first with a faint smile, as the elder of the tribe, you are qualified to know what we are talking about. Oh. What are we talking about? Xiao Xian asked. The shaman briefly told them about their conversation just now. There were 2 things. First, they suggested that the Yanjiao tribe should not fight with the Wanshur tribe. All three of them had the same idea. Here, they also represented the three tribes. The second thing was that there would be a special traveling team in the central region every year. Most of them were young people from different tribes. This time there was one more Yanjiao tribe, so they came to have a look and ask about the candidates. Chapter 276. The shaman and Xiao Xian were so engrossed in their questions and answers that they ignored the other three. Ao thought it was funny. He didn't interrupt and let Xiao Xian and the shaman talk. Then he looked at the other three with great interest. Still showing their faces. Who do they think they are? Our enmity with the Wanshur tribe has nothing to do with the other tribes. Why don't they let us start a war? Xiao Xian asked. The shaman sighed. They say we will be in trouble. How much trouble? Xiao Xian asked again. The shaman sighed again, very big. Oh. What if we start a war? Xiao Xian asked. This time, before the shaman could speak, Huang Yi finally couldn't stand it anymore. We suggest you not to start a war with the Wanshur tribe for your own good. If Yanjiao really starts a war with the Wanshur tribe, you will suffer. We are just reminding you out of kindness. Do you really think the Mang forest is willing to interfere in your affairs? Huang Yi tried hard to restrain himself from yelling. The people of Yanjiao were really as stubborn as everyone said. Ignorant. Is it because of the slave owners? Xiao Xian suddenly asked. Huang Ye's anger, which had just burst out, seemed to be directly slapped back by a big fan. He thought the people of Yanjiao only knew how to solve problems with brute force. He didn't expect to hear Xiao Xian's words. Qiu Gu of the Eight Limbs tribe and Gu Ji of the Feather tribe were also surprised. Not only these three, but also the shaman, the chief, and the two team leaders were shocked. They really didn't know. Although they were very unhappy with the other tribes interfering in their own war, they knew there must be a reason. They didn't expect Xiao Xian to suddenly say such words. They are behind the Wanshur tribe? Xiao Xian asked again. The room was silent. Even Huang Yi, who almost cursed just now, was silent with a cold face. I see. Xiao Xian nodded. Then let's talk about the second thing. What's with this special traveling team? Xiao Xian's sudden turn of events made the three of them confused. They all looked at Xiao Xian. What do you mean by, I got it? Now that I know, what then? Do you agree to not start a war for the time being, or what? Give me a definite answer. Changing the topic just like that? Huang Yi didn't want to talk. He actually had a lot of things he wanted to say. He wanted to teach this arrogant brat a lesson, but he couldn't say anything. It was suffocating. Qiu Gu, who still had a smile on his face, took over the conversation and said, the reason why we organized such a traveling team is to allow you youngsters to interact with each other more. After all, now is not that chaotic era filled with vengeance and killing. Understanding each other more is beneficial. Secondly, Xiao Xian, you mentioned the slave owners. Most of the people in the tribe have a very limited understanding of the slave owners. The formation of such a traveling team is also to let everyone know more about the threat the slave owners pose to us. Xiao Xian only believed 30% of what Qiu Gu said. But he was also sure that the tribes in the central region were indeed united to guard against the slave owners. Among the slave owners, Xiao Xian had only seen Shi Shu and had never seen anyone else. But if the big tribes in the central region were so afraid of the slave owners, they must have their reasons. I'll join, Xiao Xian said. Qiu Gu glanced at Xiao Xian, and a light flashed in his slender eyes. This is not urgent. Such a traveling team is not for everyone to join. Your strength must be recognized by the others in the team. The Yanjiao tribe was very strong in the past. They had no objection to this after learning about it. But after all, it was not the same as before. Did the Yanjiao people still have the fighting power of the past? They were skeptical about this. Looking at the current living state of Yanjiao, they were quite suspicious that the Yanjiao people had regressed. When other tribes were improving, the Yanjiao people were retreating. How could they trust the Yanjiao people's ability? This time, they decided to come to the Yanjiao tribe to have a look. They were just curious about the records left by their ancestors, but they were disappointed. There is one more thing I want to remind you. This traveling team has a lot of casualties every time they travel. More than half of them have died. Qiu Gu said. Speaking of this, whether it was Qiu Gu, Huang Yi, or Gu Ji, for their tribe, it was a heavy burden. More than half of them had died, not more than half of them had died. This traveling team, which was basically formed by the big tribes in the central region, had such a high death rate. It was obvious that the traveling team had encountered difficulties. The shaman and Ao's faces changed. They would rather not join such a traveling team than see Xiao Xian get into trouble. The shaman was about to say something when he heard a "ku" sound. It was very clear in the quiet room. What's more, the people sitting there all had good hearing. Well, I think everyone must be hungry. Why don't we stop here today and continue tomorrow? Xiao Xian said. Qiu Gu and the other two looked at each other and nodded. Okay. In that case, let's continue tomorrow. Ao got up and said. They needed to have a good talk about this. Besides, it was really late now. Ao asked Ta to take Huang Yi and others to a place to rest, and he went to the stone house with the shaman and Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian asked Ao for a piece of jerky to satisfy his hunger temporarily. When they arrived at the stone house, he didn't answer Ao and the shaman's doubts. He told them about the ancestors and the history in the forest. At this time, the shaman and Ao didn't care about the Wanshi tribe, the traveling team, or the slave owners. For them, compared with the ancestors and the history of Yanjiao, these were all behind. That night, Ao called the 2 team leaders and the 10 hunting team leaders together for a discussion. He selected 50 people from the list of hunting warriors and asked the leaders to tell them that they had one day to prepare, and the day after tomorrow they would go to the forest with Xiao Xian to bring back the remains of the ancestors and the precious history. The next day, Huang Yi and the other 2 met the Yanjiao shaman, the chief, and the young elder face to face again to continue what they didn't finish yesterday. However, they soon found that the chief of Yanjiao was looking somewhere and was always absent-minded, and the shaman seemed to be absent-minded all the time. Only Xiao Xian was talking to them about the traveling team and the slave owners. At noon, they finished the discussion. On the Yanjiao side, Xiao Xian chose to join the traveling team, and the others would discuss it later. Anyway, it was not time for the traveling team to set off yet. This was the idea of the shaman and the chief. Since they had decided, it was a foregone conclusion. As for the requirement to join the traveling team, Xiao Xian was confident that he only needed to find a person who was confirmed to be in the traveling team to fight with him. Because they had to leave for the forest tomorrow, this matter must be solved today. Who should he find? Xiao Xian looked at the accommodations arranged by the tribe for the outsiders, and his eyes swept back and forth. While Xiao Xian was choosing a target to fight with, Huang Yi and the other 2 were also discussing it. The people of Yanjiao are strange today, Huang Yi said. Is there something we don't know? Are they still unwilling to give up and want to kill Wanshi now? Gu Ji of the Feather Tribe said. No, I don't think so. Qiu Gu thought for a while and said to Gu Ji. What did you find with the birds? Speaking of the birds, although the team leader of Yanjiao also had a white falcon at the level of a ferocious beast, it alone might not be able to stop all of them. They had not only brought the 2 that were visible, but also 2 that were hidden very well. Gu Ji took out a palm-long bone flute and blew it. However, after a long time, the 2 that were visible appeared. It seemed that they had fought with the white falcon of Yanjiao, and their feathers were messy. And the two birds that they were very concerned about and secretly paid attention to Yanjiao's movements were still nowhere to be seen. Huang Yi suddenly said, "Do you still remember that there is a giant mountain eagle in Yanjiao? It is said that the eagle easily defeated an eagle of the Hui tribe." Gu Ji. He had a bad feeling. At the same time, not far from the border of the Yanjiao tribe, on the peak of another mountain, Cha-Cha pressed a struggling bird on the ground with one paw and stepped on it with the other paw. "You are still screaming. You want me to step on it again?" When Cha-Cha stepped on the bird under his foot until it couldn't even make a sound, not far from him, another bird had been stepped on and fainted. Many of its feathers had been pulled out, and it was lying there motionless, dying. Chapter 277. Xiao Xian didn't know that Cha-Cha had already tortured the two birds in the feather tribe until they were on the verge of death. He was now thinking about who to fight. He didn't know much about the people from other tribes. If the people he chose were weak, he would definitely be judged by those people as not capable enough, so he could only choose the weak ones. However, who were both in the traveling team and had good strength? So troublesome. After thinking about it, Xiao Xian smiled again. Since it was so difficult to decide, why should he choose by himself? If he had the time to choose, he might as well go back to peeling stone cores and making stoneware. Why should he stand here and think about it and waste time? Why not just let those people stand out by themselves? All Xiao Xian had to do was to fight. At this time, those people from other tribes were in the resting place arranged by the Yanjiao tribe. Their range of activities in the Yanjiao tribe was limited, so they felt bored after 2 days. They just chatted in the room. Xiao Xian came when they were chatting happily. After explaining his intention, these young people were excited. They had been bored for 2 days after coming to the Yanjiao tribe. It was rare to have such fun, so they naturally wouldn't miss it. Not all of them were qualified to join that traveling team. Some were not strong enough, but this didn't prevent them from watching the fun. Huang Yi and the others naturally heard the noise here. They didn't have time to think about whether the two birds were shot and eaten by Yanjiao people in private or taken away by the eagle. The three of them came outside the room and looked at Xiao Xian standing there, as well as the people around him who were eager to fight. "You decided so soon." Huang Yi was quite surprised. "Who are you going to choose to prove your strength?" "I don't know who joined that expedition team, and I don't know who will join. However, this isn't important." Xiao Xian's gaze swept across the people in front of him. There were young ones, and there were also other totem warriors who were nearing their middle age. He continued, "Whoever joined that team and thinks they're strong, step forward." Huang Yi raised his eyebrows. So confident? Originally, he thought that if he gave the other party time to prepare, the other party would carefully investigate before choosing a person that he could deal with. After all, there were differences in strength among those who were qualified to enter the travel team. However, he did not expect to receive such an answer. Was he stupid or overconfident? Xiao Xian's words also made these young people unhappy. They were young and impetuous. Just a moment ago, they wanted to watch the show from the sidelines. Now, Xiao Xian's words provoked their fighting spirit. "Let me." The first to step forward was a tall and strong man. He looked a little older than Xiao Xian. The muscles on his exposed arms bulged, making him look very powerful. Judging from the clothes he was wearing, this man was from the Eight Limbs tribe. "Let me do it." Another person stood out, holding a stone axe in his hand. "Although I haven't joined that team yet, I think my strength is still not bad." A third person stood out. Then, there was the fourth, the fifth. There were also several older people. If it weren't for the fact that they felt it was too bullying to stand out, they would also speak out. Huang Yi waited and waited, but still didn't hear what he wanted to hear. He couldn't help but look at Chu Su. He saw that guy looking at the leaves on a tree next to him. It seemed that the leaves were so beautiful that they attracted all his attention. What's so good about a tree full of insects? Seeing Chu Su like this, Huang Yi felt even angrier in his heart. Shouldn't you stand out at this time? Should you give the opportunity to others? Chu Su was still looking at the crooked tree on the side, whose leaves had been gnawed by insects. It seemed that he didn't know the situation at all. Chiu Gu looked at Su, who stood quietly aside without saying a word, and wondered in his heart, isn't this kid usually very hot-tempered? He can kill people if he is unhappy. Why is he so quiet now? Okay, stop arguing. Let me do it. A young man with colorful bird feathers on his head stood out. Guji raised the corner of his mouth and glanced at the cold-faced Huang Yi and the depressed Chiu Gu with a complacent face. Hong Shi, be careful. Guji said with a smile in his eyes. Seeing that Hong Shi didn't bring a knife, he handed his knife to him. Hong Shi didn't want to take the knife because he also had his own weapon. However, after thinking about it, he took it. Hong Shi of the Feather Tribe will also join the traveling team this year. Hong Shi said. Xiao Xian looked at the man standing not far away. This was the guy who blocked the road yesterday and joked about the strength of the Yanjiao tribesmen. Yanjiao, Xiao Xian. Since it was decided that Hong Shi would fight, Chu Su, who had just been paying attention to the leaves, immediately shifted his attention. He looked at the two people who were ready to fight over there and whispered to Su, let's make a bet. If you lose, lend me your white-haired spider to play with for a day. Su touched the white-haired spider under her body to comfort her. The white-haired spider she held in her arms in the past could now be used as a chair. What are we betting on? Su asked. Who will win between Hong Shi and Xiao Xian? I bet on Xiao Xian, and you bet on Hong Shi. If I lose, I will give you 2 bamboo rats. After a pause, he added, the 2 fattest ones. Su glanced at him indifferently and said, I won't bet. While Chu Su and Su were talking, the 2 people over there had already started. Xiao Xian moved first. Like a leopard hunting in the mountains, he moved quickly and punched fiercely. However, although Xiao Xian was fast, Hong Shi was faster. His body seemed to be lighter in an instant, like the twisting of the air. Every time, he could easily avoid Xiao Xian's fists. Hong Shi was not in a hurry to fight. It seemed that he wanted to play with his opponent. Looking at Xiao Xian's fierce offensive, Guji nodded and said, his style is really Yanjiao. In terms of strength, the people of the Feather Tribe would definitely lose. Even if Guji fought in person, he could not withstand Xiao Xian's intensive and fierce offensive. This was a natural weakness. However, in terms of speed, the people of the Feather Tribe were not afraid. Even the people of the Mang Tribe and the Eight Limbs Tribe had to admit this. While Guji and Chiu Gu were evaluating, Chu Su and Su looked at each other in silence. At first, they also thought that Xiao Xian's attacking style was indeed very fierce and violent, as described by their ancestors. But the more they knew, the more they doubted it. Yes, the people of Yanjiao did have an absolute advantage in strength, but in terms of speed, they might not lose. Sure enough, before Guji finished his second sentence, the situation over there changed again. Xiao Xian stopped his offensive. He was not as tired as others thought. Instead, he was in the mood to move his hands and feet. Warm-up is over. Pay attention. After finishing his words, Xiao Xian moved again. The totem patterns covered his elbows, and the totem power climbed to the limit in an instant. If Xiao Xian's figure was like a leopard in the forest just now, then now it was like lightning, and his speed was more than doubled. The movement of his footsteps on the ground was not big. Every time he looked over, his feet had already left the place, leaving only scattered dust. Hong Shi's eyes focused, and he no longer had the mood to play games. In the face of such a fast and fierce attack, he planned to temporarily avoid it, and then look for an opportunity to attack. However, he did not expect that when he decided to avoid it, Xiao Xian almost moved at the same time. The soles of his feet suddenly turned on the ground, and the ground collapsed because of the force from the soles of his feet, leaving a pit. Xiao Xian's body suddenly changed direction with the force. The sound of friction between his galloping body and the air was like a strong arrow shot by a strong bow. With a sharp sound of breaking the air, he appeared in front of Hong Shi in an instant. His arm was like a spear that was thrown out with great force, rushing straight to Hong Shi. He could not avoid it. In the face of an unexpected situation, Hong Shi only had time to block the rushing fist with his saber. If he couldn't block this punch, his bones would probably crack. There was a muffled bang. The saber successfully blocked the rushing fist, but Hong Shi's footsteps were disordered. People who often hunted had a long-term habit of not giving their prey any time to breathe. The rapid sound of breaking the air still did not stop. This time, Xiao Xian did not bombard him from the front, but after catching up, he jumped up and punched. The shadow of his fist came down from above. Bang! Once again, he blocked the fist attack, but Hong Shi felt the strong force transmitted through the saber. He had no time to care about the pain in his arm, and only felt his body sinking down. He thought, oh no. The ground here was not as sturdy as other places. It was mostly mud instead of rock. Therefore, Hong Shi's ankles had sunk into the ground after withstanding such a powerful attack. It was not easy to retreat. He wanted to jump out, but before he could jump up, another punch came down. Everyone only heard a series of dense bangs like a rainstorm, and Hong Shi, who was under such an attack, was like a hammered nail. Every time he was hit, he sank a little. Chapter 278. In just a breath's time, Hong Shi, who was standing on the ground like everyone else, sank into the ground from his waist down. Those who stood in front of Hong Shi and wanted to fight with Xiao Xian at first, listened to the boom and felt as if they were hit by the fist, which made their scalps tingle. This guy is actually using his fist as a hammer. Didn't it hurt? Wouldn't his hand bones be broken? Why didn't he use a knife? Didn't Xiao Xian also carry a knife? Why didn't he use a knife? Huang Yi and the others knew that if Xiao Xian really used a knife, Hong Shi would have been dead. When Xiao Xian stopped, Hong Shi was still in the posture of holding the knife, frozen there. Xiao Xian looked at the three people and asked, "Is it okay?" Huang Yi answered with an ambiguous yes. That is to say, I am qualified to participate. Xiao Xian continued to ask. Yes. Huang Yi said. Oh, goodbye. After that, Xiao Xian lifted his foot and left. Gu Ji felt the eyes of Huang Yi and Qiu Gu and blushed. Before that, he had asked Hong Shi to pay attention. The people of the Feather tribe hurried over to pull Hong Shi out. Gu Ji's broad and thick stone knife still retained the temperature brought by the hit. It was a little hot. They checked Hong Shi's injuries. They were not too serious, just a little miserable. He felt the pain of tearing muscles all over his body when he moved slightly. Hong Shi, you should have held the knife with the blade facing up. You could have blocked it. Maybe when that guy's fist came down, it would have been cut off by the knife. Someone couldn't help but say. Yes, and at that time, you should have, shut up. Hong Shi roared with blue veins on his forehead, do you think I am stupid and don't know how to use a knife? Or do you think Xiao Xian is stupid and doesn't know how to avoid the blade? If I had a chance, would I be beaten like this? Just in time, that guy hasn't gone far. You take the knife and continue to fight. The others stopped talking. Although Hong Shi's weapon wasn't a saber and he wasn't as proficient in using it as others, it didn't mean that he didn't know how to use a saber. It looked very simple, but when he really faced it, the pressure he felt was completely different. At that time, Hong Shi really had an illusion that he was facing a fierce beast from the forest. When he blocked the other party's attack, he felt as if the bones in his hand were about to shatter. Even turning the hilt of his saber was difficult. Hong Shi knew that his defeat was justified. What he shouldn't have done was to be careless at the beginning, which led to him being in a passive state and losing in an extremely stupid way. I should have used my own weapon. Hong Shi struggled to walk to Gu Ji with the saber, handed it back to him, and said angrily, "When I get better, we'll fight again next time. I'll use my own weapon next time." After a moment of silence, he added, "It's not that I can't afford to lose, I just feel that I haven't shown my true strength yet." Chu Su couldn't help laughing. "What are you laughing at?" Hong Shi glared at him. "Your feathers are falling off." Chu Su pointed to his head and said. Hong Shi's face turned red, and he said angrily, "Chu Su, wait for me. When I get better, I'll fight with you." Ignoring the quarrel of the young people over there, Huang Yi sighed to Gu Ji and Chiu Gu beside him. "Now I believe that Huma of the Dishan tribe was killed by him." Before this, Huang Yi and the other two had heard the rumor that Huma of the Dishan tribe was killed by a young man with an eagle in Yanjiao, but they didn't believe it. Because 99% of the rumor was exaggerated and absurd, not to mention the Yanjiao tribe which was in hot discussion, they didn't take the news they heard at that time seriously. But now it seemed that it was very likely to be Xiao Xian. Alas! Gu Ji patted his forehead. "I forgot to test that guy and see if he knows about the 2 missing birds." Without informing the Yanjiao tribe and secretly with 2 birds as spies, anyone would doubt his motives. In this case, once strange and suspicious birds were found, it was very likely that he would shoot them directly. How to ask? Gu Ji felt sorry for the 2 birds. He had trained them for a long time, and they were rarely caught in the past. This time, he really didn't expect it. The Yanjiao tribe seemed to have a lot of secrets. The next day, the chief of the Yanjiao tribe, Ao, asked Huang Yi and the other 2 to have a talk. When the 3 of them arrived, they saw the 2 dying birds on the stone table and the serious faces of the Yanjiao warriors around them. Huang Yi only felt a headache. "Why didn't I see Xiao Xian?" Chiu Gu asked. "He has something else to do." Ao didn't intend to say more. Huang Yi glanced around. Except for Xiao Xian, the 2 Yanjiao leaders were not there. What did they do? Forget it, no matter what they did, as long as they didn't go directly to the people of the Wanshu tribe. Ao ignored Huang Ye's doubts, just grabbed the 2 birds and talked with the people of the Feather tribe. On the other side, early in the morning, Xiao Xian left the tribe with Ta and Gigu and went to the Ferocious Beasts mountain forest. Not far from the border of the tribe, there was a team of about 10 people waiting there. Beside them were several ferocious beasts that hadn't shown up in the tribe these days. The shaman thought that these ferocious beasts had nothing to do. Since they were going to the depths of the forest this time, they should take them with them. They shouldn't stay in the tribe for too long and lose their ferocity. Ferocious beasts were better to be ferocious. "Is everyone here?" Xiao Xian looked at the people around him and asked. "Yes." Gigu said. Ta nodded. "Then let's go." More than 50 figures followed Xiao Xian to the depths of the Ferocious Beasts mountain forest. Around these 50 figures, there were some running shadows of beasts. Xiao Xian had walked a part of the road they were taking, telling them what beasts they needed to pay attention to, what dangerous plants and animals were in the forest, and what they needed to pay attention to. However, there was another part that Xiao Xian hadn't walked. Last time when Xiao Xian entered the forest, he first went in the direction indicated by Cha-Cha, and then changed direction halfway. When he went back through the stone. This time, they set out from the tribe. In order to find the remains of their ancestors and the history of the Yanjiao tribe that had been left outside for nearly 1,000 years as soon as possible, they almost went in a straight line. There were many unknown dangers, more unpredictable ferocious beasts and harsh environments, but they were not afraid. In such an environment, they had long lost the fear of other tribesmen. What they had was only the excitement of the challenge, and the persistence and eagerness to bring back their ancestors and history. At the same time, this road was very likely to be their new hunting route in the future. Since returning to the old haunt, they hadn't decided on a new hunting route, but the matter of their ancestors had helped them solve this problem. Perhaps this was also a kind of instruction from their ancestors. In the past, their ancestors must have often taken this road. Today, the descendants of the Yanjiao tribe would take this road again, and also tell the forest that those who had left back then had returned. The sound of the stone tools striking the ground was endless. Blood splattered everywhere with a thick, suffocating murderous aura. The roars of the giant beasts in the forest were deafening, and the startled flocks of birds flew in the direction of the setting sun while squawking. Under the dark blue sky, the road was stained with blood, and they pressed forward. Chapter 279. It had taken them 5 days to get here from the tribe, with only a short rest along the way. They had also found 2 caves that could be used as strongholds. Of course, there had been ferocious beasts in the caves, but they had been encircled and killed by them. They had become dinner that night. Everyone had fought a bloody battle. The deeper they went into the forest, the more they felt the familiar, exciting, dangerous, and blood-boiling hunting feeling came back. They liked this old place very much and were very satisfied with this forest. If other tribes knew how the Yanjiao people felt about this forest, they would definitely think that the Yanjiao people were all crazy and liked to live with ferocious beasts as their neighbors. They were looking for trouble. But the Yanjiao people who came from the other side of the river had been in contact with this kind of environment since childhood. Facing this kind of environment, it was easier for them to adapt. Sometimes the 2 team leaders even wondered if there was a place deeper in the forest like a green land, where all kinds of precious and dangerous plants grew. In just 5 days, everyone was like a killer who had crawled out of a thick sea of blood, full of ruthlessness and killing intent. And the ferocious beasts that had been brought out with them looked even more ferocious. If they hadn't softened their eyes when they looked at the Yanjiao people and were obedient enough, they would have looked no different from the native ferocious beasts in the forest at first glance. That's it. Xiao Xian pointed to a place on the mountain and said. Although they hadn't reached that place yet, Ta and Gigu looked in the direction Xiao Xian pointed. They could clearly see a place blocked by a big stone. Behind the stone, there must be the cave where the ancestors lived, as Xiao Xian had said. Taking a deep breath, everyone couldn't help but tidy up their animal skin clothes, patting off the grass bits stuck to their animal skin clothes. Then, they went to a spring on the mountain and washed their faces, rubbing away some of the dried blood on their arms and legs. In front of the ancestors, they would treat them seriously. After carefully tidying up, the group went up the mountain. The cave no longer had the protective force that Xiao Xian had encountered the last time he came here. It looked no different from an ordinary cave. Xiao Xian moved the boulder that was blocking the entrance of the cave away and had a few vicious beasts stand guard outside. Then, he led the 2 team leaders and the others into the cave. The insect-repelling herbs that were scattered in the cave last time were still there, but the smell was much fainter. Before Xiao Xian left last time, although he had set up traps and scattered some insect-repelling herbs, the power that protected the cave was gone. Xiao Xian was worried that the bodies of the ancestors would rot, so he put the bone ornament on the body of the person who was sitting cross-legged on the ground. The other 6 bodies were also moved closer by Xiao Xian. Since the bone ornaments were able to protect the remains of their ancestors in the King Stoneworm's cave, they should be able to do the same now. After entering the cave, Xiao Xian looked carefully. The 7 bodies of the ancestors were the same as the last time he saw them. They did not rot quickly, which made Xiao Xian feel relieved. Every time they saw the remains of their ancestors, the people of the Yanjiao tribe were very excited. Especially after hearing from Xiao Xian what he saw in the cave last time, Ta, Gigu, and the others wanted to kneel down and kowtow to show their respect for their ancestors. Ta held a torch and carefully followed Xiao Xian into the innermost part of the cave. These are the history. Xiao Xian pointed at the boxes and said. Whether it was the ancestors or the boxes that contained the history of the Yanjiao, they would send them back to the tribe at all costs. After seeing the ancestors and the history, the two team leaders led the others out of the cave and went down the mountain to chop wood to make palanquins. In fact, they were not exactly palanquins. They were just made to look like 3 carriages. When the time came, each carriage would be carried by 4 people, and the others would guard around it. Xiao Xian and the others rested in the cave for 2 days. During these 2 days, they also finished the palanquins used to carry the ancestors. They carefully put the bodies of the 7 ancestors into one palanquin, and the boxes containing the history were put in 2 groups in the other 2 palanquins. There were limited things left in the cave, and many of them had lost their original appearance. If they saw these things in the tribe, they would definitely throw them away as garbage. But these were left by the ancestors, so they had a different meaning. They took what they could take with them, and left the rest in the cave if they felt it was unnecessary. When the route is opened, we will come back again, Gigu said. They went back much slower. After all, they had to carry the ancestors and the history, and they had to keep them from being destroyed by other ferocious beasts. Naturally, it would take more time. At this time, the ferocious beasts were doing very well. They would attract other ferocious beasts away, and then find a place to kill them, instead of fighting around the palanquins. 8 days later, they returned to the tribe. When they were still some distance away from the tribe, they met the people sent by the shaman and the chief to pick them up, and they also shared the pressure of everyone. Everyone was injured, and so were the ferocious beasts, but they were in good spirits. The former thought it was a great honor to bring back the ancestors and the history, while the latter thought it was a good time to go out and have fun. Although they almost died several times, and had many injuries on their bodies, they were happy enough. The people from the other tribes had already left, and the people in the tribe stopped all their work and followed the shaman and the chief to the border to welcome them. Some people didn't know why they had to go out like this at first, but after they told each other, they couldn't help but be excited. Those are the ancestors. What do the ancestors look like? They must be mighty and extraordinary. I heard that those who worship the ancestors will be blessed by the ancestors. I know a warrior who has worshipped him before. Later on, he was able to get through several dangerous situations during hunting. You also found the ancestors before? Yes, I heard it was Elder Xiao Xian who found them. Then what about this time? I heard it was also Elder Xiao Xian who found them. No wonder he is an elder, for the Yanjiao people, even if the ancestor's body was only a skeleton, it still had a sacred and inviolable aura. Unfortunately, they didn't get to see what their ancestors looked like. They only saw 3 large chests being carried by a dozen people. Welcome back, ancestors. The shaman and the chief were the first to kneel. Thousands of people at the border all knelt down. Even the children who didn't know anything knelt down with the adults. They didn't have their usual naughtiness, and they had a very strange feeling. It was a little heavy, but also a little excited. When Xiao Xian brought back the ancestor's body from the cave of the king stoneworm, the tribe held a ceremony to cremate the ancestors. This time it was the same, but not immediately. Because of the protection of the bone ornaments, the 7 ancestors' bodies wouldn't rot quickly. The shaman put them in a room in the stone house and didn't leave the house for several days. He wasn't facing the ancestors all the time, but he was studying the history that was brought back. Ao also went to read it every day. Guizhe, who was chosen by the shaman to be his successor, followed the shaman every day to read the history left behind. There was too much information that they needed to grasp. Xiao Xian and Guizhe divided the work, categorizing the selected information and then rewriting it, such as the records of astronomical phenomena, farming, animal husbandry, handicrafts, and so on. Although thousands of years had passed, some of the information was still very helpful. Whether it was the shamaness or Chief Ao, although they knew that the Flaming Horns tribe was once glorious, they didn't have a more specific concept. The records left by their ancestors were limited, but now, through these histories, they deeply felt the prosperity of the past. Thinking of the arrogant faces of the people from the other tribes a few days ago, and then thinking of the overbearing Flaming Horn tribe, Ao only felt that there was still a long way to go. The Flaming Horn tribe needed to develop and return to its former strength, but it also needed time. Who are the ancestors that came back? Xiao Xian seized the time to ask the shaman. The shaman was silent for a while, and then slowly said, during the disaster, the shaman of the Yanjiao tribe passed the position of shaman to the next successor and asked the new shaman and the chief to leave with the people of the tribe. He himself took more than 100 people and hid these precious history in the forest to prevent it from being damaged by natural disasters or man-made disasters. More than 100 people and the shaman guarded the history until the end of their lives. More than 100 people. Xiao Xian was puzzled. When he found the cave, there were only 7 people, including the shaman. The others are dead. Not even their bones are left. The shaman stroked a small animal skin scroll in his hand. This was the last record of the shaman. It felt like every word was weeping blood and was extremely heavy. During the disaster, the ferocious beasts in the forest were also frightened by the sudden changes in the world and became manic. Every day, people who went out to hunt would die when encountering such crazy ferocious beasts. Not even their bodies were left behind. In the end, only the 7 of them were left. Even when they died, their clansmen did not come back. If one day, I encounter the same situation, I will do the same. The shaman said. When do you plan to hold the sacrifice? Xiao Xian asked. The shaman did not answer, but asked Xiao Xian, can you carve the carvings on the stone pillars again? No problem. Xiao Xian said. During the time when they left for the ferocious beasts forest, Ao had brought more than 1,000 people to transport several huge stone pillars. Xiao Xian understood the shaman's meaning. He hoped that the pillars could be completed before the ancestors were cremated. Because the stone pillars were too big, it was impossible for Xiao Xian to complete all of them. The shamaness and chief called over some skilled stonemasons to polish the stone pillars. They didn't want the pillars to be bumpy. After the first round of polishing, Xiao Xian would carve the engravings in his memory onto the pillars. In the past, Xiao Xian only remembered the carvings on the stone pillars, but did not understand what they were. However, after reading the more detailed records left by the ancestors, he found that many of the carvings on the stone pillars had special meanings. The carvings on different stone pillars were also different. In addition to being used as a sundial, they also had a sacrificial meaning. It was no wonder that the shaman hoped that when the ancestors were cremated, he would repair the damaged and missing things around them according to the records left by the ancestors. That was the most orthodox sacrificial ceremony of the Yanjiao tribes. Chapter 280. According to the records left by the ancestors, there should be 2 tall stone pillars near the fire pit, not 1. When Xiao Xian first came to the old haunt, he only saw 1 tall stone pillar. As for the other one, it might have been destroyed a long time ago. Maybe it was man-made, or maybe it was a natural disaster. In addition, there were other shorter stone pillars. They were not as meaningful as the first 2 pillars, but they were more flexible. Xiao Xian was in charge of the 2 largest stone pillars closest to the fire pit. The other pillars were engraved by other people. He only needed to engrave some symbolic patterns on those pillars. Xiao Xian was responsible for the 2 largest stone pillars. They were located on both sides of the fire pit, in the direction where the sun rose and the sun set. The stone pillars were mainly carved with totem patterns, but these totem patterns were slightly different from the ones on the warriors' bodies. The gaps between the patterns were larger, and some patterns were carved in the gaps. On the stone pillars located in the direction where the sun rose, there were carvings of machetes, bows and arrows, stone balls, hammers, axes, picks, chisels, and other tools that warriors often used, including hunting and daily necessities. In addition, there were also various kinds of ferocious beasts. Although there were many pictures, each picture was not complicated. It only took a few strokes on the animal skin scroll to show their characteristics, allowing people to see what was drawn on it at a glance. On the stone pillars near where the sun set, there were carvings of various plants, flowers, ornaments, and so on. Some of the plants and flowers were planted and picked, and some of them were commonly used herbs. The carvings on the stone pillars represented the meaning of harvest, prosperity, and so on. It was also like a prayer that was divided into two parts. Xiao Xian first drew them on a piece of animal skin roll based on his memory, and then cut a piece of wood to try to make a miniature model. The small wooden stake was simple. Xiao Xian started carving the day before, and he could show it to the shaman and the chief the next day. When the huge stone pillars were erected, the tribe was filled with cheers. As long as the wanderers climbed up the trees and pushed away the leaves that were blocking their sight, they could see the two pillars that were erected high up on the other side. The short stone pillars in other parts of the tribe were also completed one after another. This was more and more similar to the tribe's appearance thousands of years ago in the records left by their ancestors. Perhaps there would be more changes in the tribe in the future, but for now, they just wanted to replicate the tribe as much as possible. Once the stone pillars were completed, the cremation of the ancestors would naturally begin. This time, everyone clearly saw the appearance of the 7 ancestors. However, no one was afraid. Instead, they were filled with reverence. They knelt down even more reverently and devoutly. They prayed for a good harvest under the protection of their ancestors. They prayed for peace and strength. They prayed for their young children to awaken smoothly. In the fire pit, flames rose and engulfed the remains of the 7 ancestors. Not long after, even their ashes were gone. A strong gust of wind blew from the forest. Perhaps it was due to the influence of the newly erected stone pillars, but when the wind blew, it carried with it a rising and falling sound, as if someone was whispering or singing. Some said that the ancestors who had died in the forest had returned. Others said that the ancestors were responding to their prayers. No matter what the truth was, as long as everyone thought so, no one would really stand out to refute it. After the ceremony of cremation of the ancestors was over and everyone dispersed, Ao walked to the pile of broken stones on the side and stood there for a long time. Most of these stones were broken stone pillars and other building fragments broken by the people of the Wanshi tribe. Every time they saw these, the Yanjiao people held their breath. "We will definitely fight against the Wanshi tribe," Ao said. Sooner or later, there would be a war with the Wanshi tribe. Xiao Xian knew clearly that the Yanjiao people would not be able to accept this and would feel ashamed to face their ancestors. Perhaps the ancestors were worried that someone would come to the old haunt to destroy it, so they took the precious history to the depths of the forest. They took it far away and hid it in a place where no one dared to go. Perhaps this war is not far away, Ao said, looking at Xiao Xian. "Xian, although I don't like those people from other tribes to intervene in our war, I still care about the slave owners," they said. "After all, those are things we don't know, and the ancestors have never recorded them." As a leader, he naturally needed to consider more and could not act rashly. If there were no slave owners, even if other tribes in the central region opposed, he would still fight. But the slave owners, Ao did have scruples in his heart. The Wanshi tribe, which was predicted by the ancestors to perish long ago, had become strong. What role did the slave owners play in it? After I join the expedition team, I'll do my best to find out more about the slave masters, Xiao Xian said. Even if he had seen a slave owner, he knew very little. He only knew one thing: slave owners are very ambitious. Ao also knew that the slave owners could make the people of the central tribes fear them and even put down their hatred for each other for the time being. Naturally, they were not easy to deal with. This time, Lei and Tua will go with you, Ao said. There were 3 people who joined the traveling team in Yanjiao this time. Lei was a very famous person among the younger generation of the tribe. After all, there were tribal leaders in his family. Lei's own strength was also good, and he had a ferocious beast. And Tua was not bad. As a person who joined the advanced team very early, he had enough strength. The gathering time mentioned by Huang Yi was very close, and Xiao Xian and the other 2 were about to leave soon. Before leaving, Huang Yi also took out a map, on which the gathering place was marked. It was a very simple map, with a few monotonous strokes and several general tribal branch marks. It was too vague to find without a guide. Fortunately, Xiao Xian had a more detailed map in his hand. Although it was incomplete, the gathering place mentioned by Huang Yi happened to be near the edge of the map drawn by Xiao Xian. The edge of the map was naturally not the edge of the mainland. Xiao Xian did not know more about the farther places, and could not get exact information from other people. This time, he could perfect the map again. Tua, Lei, and Xiao Xian. Among the 3, Xiao Xian was the youngest, but also the highest among the 3. After all, he was the elder. Therefore, without Ao and other people's advice, Lei and Tua also knew that outside, Xiao Xian's opinion was the main. Besides, they were good at hunting, but not good at finding a place. Because of the special situation, Lei could not take his own ferocious beast with him, so he gave his ferocious beast, Meng, to his father. And Xiao Xian did not take Caesar. There were too many variables outside, so it was inconvenient to take it. You can go hunting with Uncle Mai. When hunting, don't fight, don't run around, and listen to old Ku at home. If you meet a female wolf in the mountains, you can bring it back for everyone to see, but don't let it bite the people in the tribe, Xiao Xian said while brushing Caesar's hair. Caesar was not in a good mood. He was a little upset that Xiao Xian did not take him out. Xiao Xian said a few words to him, and he whispered in response. 3 days later, Xiao Xian, Lei and Tua left the tribe and went to the gathering place of the traveling team mentioned by Huang Yi. They left before the sun came out. Except for a few people, they did not disturb other people in the tribe. Chapter 281. On the map left by Huang Yi, the gathering place of the traveling team was not a populated place. It was surrounded by wild mountains. Probably because of the weather, it seldom rained in this area, so the vegetation on the mountain was not as dense and thick as the woods in the ferocious beast mountain forest. There were basically no ferocious beasts, and the number of large beasts was not large either. Such a desolate place was actually the gathering place of a traveling team. If there was no one to lead the way, it would be very difficult to find the exact location. On the top of a mountain, there were several wooden houses or houses surrounded by rattan grass. At this time, some people in different clothes were looking around on the grass in front of the houses. How is it? Huang Yi walked out of a bamboo house and asked a middle-aged man standing outside. The people of the Longboat tribe have just arrived. The rest of them are the Tianshan tribe and the Hui tribe. The man said. What about the Yanjiao tribe? Huang Yi asked. The Yanjiao tribe? The man didn't remember which tribe the Yanjiao tribe was. After a few seconds, he remembered it and then smiled carelessly. It's the first time for them to participate in this trip. Maybe they can't find the way. The people of the Yanjiao tribe don't have a guide. Another man came and said. They were all people who had participated in many excursions. Although they would not participate in every excursion, they would take turns to lead. Every few years, each of them would act as an experienced elder and a guide, leading the younger generation of the tribe out. If all of them were young warriors who joined the excursion team for the first time, they would not be able to find a place to gather. If no one took care of them, how many people would die? It was possible that the whole team would be wiped out. I heard that 3 people from the Yanjiao tribe will come this time. I don't know if they can survive. A man said. Not to mention whether they can survive or not, whether they can find this place on time is unknown. As they were discussing, they heard some people not far away say, "Here they come." In the air, there were 2 dots flying over. The Hui tribe? The Tian Shan tribe? Only those 2 tribes would come by birds. For a while, no one could be sure. But after the 2 shadows flew closer, someone said, "They are from the Tian Shan tribe." How do you know? The young warrior who participated in this trip for the first time was confused. Birds are different. The bellies of the birds on Tian Shan Mountain were white. Not the Hui tribe. A man from the Feather tribe said. Even though it was his first time participating, he had done some research on the birds of each tribe and could judge them based on their morphological characteristics. That's true. The 2 silhouettes in the sky flew closer and closer, heading straight for this side. Hoo! The sound of wings flapping could be heard. Dust and gravel were sent flying, and the powerful claws easily left deep claw marks on the rocky ground. They were 2 huge eagles, standing on the ground with their wings folded. They were about 5 meters tall, and when they spread their wings, they looked even bigger. The feathers on the upper half of their bodies were generally dark brown, and there were some patterns of different shades on the feathers. The parts near the abdomen were pure white, without a trace of other colors. Because they had a few hard and short crests on their heads, at first glance, they looked like they had horns, so they were also called horned eagles. As giants among flying birds, only a few birds, such as the giant mountain eagle, could be compared with them. The front end of its sharp beak was hooked, and it had strong claws and sharp nails that could easily crush the skull of its prey. It had a strong body and a fierce appearance, especially when the hair on its head stood up. When it looked at people, it was like a ferocious monster staring at you. Some young warriors looked into the eyes of the eagles, swallowed their saliva and avoided their eyes. They were really fierce. There were 5 people standing on each horned eagle, each with a big bow on his back and 3 long feathers on his head. Looking at the 10 people coming, Huang Yi smiled and greeted the leader who was about the same age as him. He asked about the things on the way and whether it went well. But the people of the Feather tribe, such as Hong Shi and Gu Ji, didn't look at the people of the Tian Shan tribe with a good face. But the people of other tribes, especially some young warriors, looked at the 2 eagles of the Tian Shan tribe with envy. When they came here, they climbed several mountains. If they didn't climb, they would take a long detour. But for the Tian Shan tribe, they could arrive directly by bird. How refreshing it was. The people of the Tian Shan tribe completely ignored the bad looks around, but for those who looked at them with envy, they smiled back proudly. Not long after the arrival of the Tian Shan tribe, the people of the Hui tribe also arrived. As before, there were 2 giant mountain eagles, but this time there were only 9 of them. Is everyone here? Shall we set off now? Or take a rest for 2 days? The middle-aged leader of the Tian Shan tribe glanced around and said. Let's take a rest for 2 more days. Besides, the people of the Yanjiao tribe haven't arrived yet, Huang Yi said. There are more people. The Yanjiao tribe? Hearing this name, the people of the Tian Shan tribe changed their expressions. They looked at each other and smiled gloomily. The people of the Yanjiao tribe also come this time. No guide? The people of the Hui tribe looked at the people of the Tian Shan tribe and frowned with worry. It's the first time for us to join the team. Of course there is no guide, someone said. Without a guide, it would be difficult to find the place. Then let's wait for 2 days. After 2 days, if we still don't see the people of the Yanjiao tribe, we'll set off, the people of the Tian Shan tribe said. The other tribes agreed. 2 days was the last chance for the Yanjiao tribe. If they still didn't see the people of the Yanjiao tribe in 2 days, they would leave. 2 days later. In the morning, the people on the top of the mountain came out of their houses. Looking at the rising sun, they packed up and were ready to set off. The people of the Hui tribe looked into the distance and shook their heads with a sigh. Hong Shi and Chu Su had no choice. Even if they wanted to wait for the people of the Yanjiao tribe, it was impossible. The people of the Mang tribe, the Eight Limbs tribe, the Hui tribe, the Tianshan tribe, the Yu tribe, the Thousand Masks tribe, the Long Boat tribe and some other smaller tribes in the central part of the tribe walked down from the top of the mountain. But when they reached the mountainside, several eagle calls came from the sky. There were mountain eagles of the Hui tribe and horned eagles of the Tianshan tribe. "They're coming," someone of the Hui tribe said. In the sky, a figure smaller than the other four appeared. With a loud eagle call, it swooped down toward the team. When it passed by the team, 3 figures jumped down. It was Xiao Xian and the other 2. "Finally, we're here. Sorry, it's my first time here, so I'm late," Xiao Xian said to the people he knew among the older people. He didn't pay attention to the other people who were looking at him with a little malice. Huang Yi nodded, "Good. Can you hurry up now?" "No problem," Xiao Xian said. Without a rest, Xiao Xian and the other 2 followed the team down the mountain. On the way down the mountain, Xiao Xian observed the team and found that the undercurrents in the team were not as harmonious as they seemed. Xiao Xian took the time to remind Tuo and Lei to be careful of the people around them and to be vigilant. Although Tuo and Lei were also vigilant, because they had joined the tribe's hunting team before, they were used to the tacit cooperation in the team. Hearing Huang Yi said that they were a united team and partners, they were slightly relaxed and chatted with some people from other tribes around them. But since Xiao Xian reminded them to be careful, they became vigilant. Especially those people from Tianshan Mountain. Seeing that Tuo and Lei still didn't quite understand, Xiao Xian didn't say much, but just reminded them. Don't think that half of the people they said died in the hands of slaves and slave owners. If they didn't die in the hands of others, and there were not many ferocious beasts here, then it could only be their own people. Of course, although they were in the same team, they came from different tribes and were not completely on the same side. Looking carefully, those people from different tribes gathered together, and each group kept a certain vigilant distance between them. After leaving the gathering place, the team went in one direction, where Xiao Xian had never been before. One day later, they saw a long slave team of more than 200 people on the road. Long vines tied those slaves together, and next to this team, there were some people with whips guarding. Those were the higher-ranked slaves. Chapter 282. The slaves, whose wrists were bound by vines, wore almost nothing on their bodies. Even if they did, the animal skins were tattered and could not cover much. Under the Yangguang's scorching sun, they were all tanned, their lips were dry, and their faces were haggard. They walked barefoot on the ground. Some of the wounded slaves did not get good treatment, and their wounds had rotted. Some flying insects, which smelled the scent, followed them all the way. "Where are those slaves sent to?" Xiao Xian asked. If he didn't ask, the others wouldn't explain. Of course, he had to take the initiative to ask. Even if he was laughed at by others, Xiao Xian didn't care, as long as he could know what he wanted to know. As soon as Xiao Xian asked this question, some people sneered, but there were also some who answered. It didn't matter if they said it in a mocking tone, as long as Xiao Xian knew the answer, it was fine. "Of course, they are sent to where the slave owners live," someone said. "Where do the slave owners live? Is that where we are going this time?" Xiao Xian asked. "What, are you afraid?" a man of the Tianshan tribe said with contempt. Xiao Xian didn't say anything. He looked at the sky, then looked at the surrounding environment, recalled the terrain along the way, and said, "The slave owners don't seem to live in a good place. If they kept going forward, they might reach the desert area." The slave owners lived in the desert. This made Xiao Xian very curious. Although he knew that the slave owners would stay away from the big tribes in the central region to avoid them, he didn't expect that they would run to an arid and barren area. Not good. An older middle-aged man next to Huang Yi snorted, "They are really living a good life. Only the slaves are not living a good life." That was true. The slave owners were naturally the ones who were being served. Just then, in the long line of slaves, a slave suddenly broke free from the vines and ran towards Xiao Xian. Although he looked like a bag of bones, he ran so fast that he didn't look weak at all. Someone in the group of slaves shouted and looked at the person running. The dark-skinned slave with unkempt hair was running towards Xiao Xian and the others, shouting with a hoarse voice. He probably wanted to ask for help. Xiao Xian could see the light of hope in his eyes. Puff! A sharpened piece of wood pierced through the running man's body. Blood dripped to the ground, and the light in the slave's eyes was quickly extinguished. A man wearing animal skin and holding a whip walked towards the slave on the floor. On his forehead, there was a tattoo that looked like the character, Tai. "It's a slave with the title, Tai," someone in the team said. His tone was calm, without any emotional fluctuations because he had just seen a slave killed. Slaves were also divided into classes. The lower-class slaves didn't have any titles, while the higher-class slaves started from Tai, because they would have a tattoo similar to the character Tai on their foreheads, so they were called Tai slaves. In terms of strength, they were equivalent to the beginner totem warriors. For those who became slaves, their initial goal was to be a Tai slave. So what if they became a slave? As long as they could get the strength equivalent to a totem warrior, it was enough. A Tai slave was the lowest class of the higher class slaves. Above the Tai slave, there was a Pu slave. There were also some Pu slaves in this slave team, but they didn't hold whips, only knives. They didn't seem to care about anything and seemed to be very harmless. But as long as they took action, the ground would be stained with blood. At that time, it would involve more than one slave. Therefore, when the slave ran away, the Pu slaves just glanced at him casually. Some of them didn't even raise their heads and continued on their way. Anyway, there were Tai slaves who were lower than them to deal with it. The Tai slave strode towards the slave on the floor, and glanced at Xiao Xian and the others. There was no vigilance, no concern, no other superfluous emotions. He was numb and as cold as a knife. When he looked at the lower-class slaves, it was no different from looking at other dead things. He bent down, stretched out a hand to grab the dead slave's foot on the ground, and dragged him back to the team. There was a long blood stain on the ground because of the dragging. The Tai slave dragged the dead slave back to the team, and waved his arm to throw the dead slave into the team of lower-class slaves. Then, Xiao Xian saw those haggard slaves with tied wrists scrambling to surround the slave. That is. Ray stuttered. Over at Eight Limb's side, a cold voice said, "They are snatching food." Their wrists were tied, but they could still move their fingers, arms, and legs. They were snatching food, although the food was the same as them. If they didn't eat, they were likely to starve to death. Only by eating could they survive. Seeing Xiao Xian and the others were silent, someone from the Tian Shan tribe said, "You can't stand it? If you really can't stand it, you can save one or two lower-class slaves. If that slave ran closer, you could save him in time." Seeing the reactions of others in the team, Xiao Xian and the others also knew that there was something they didn't know. These people mostly looked at the slaves with disgust in their eyes. Indeed, many totem warriors looked down upon the slaves, thinking that they were spineless and betrayed their ancestors. However, they were not like these people in the team. Especially the people from Eight Limb's side, there was even hatred in their eyes. Xiao Xian learned the reason from Chu Su. A few years ago, someone from the Eight Limbs tribe encountered a similar situation. He saved a few low-class slaves and also killed a few Tai slaves on the way. In fact, at the beginning, the people from 8 Limbs were very secretive and disguised. Their identities shouldn't have been discovered, but they were discovered. A young girl from 8 Limbs gave a slave a piece of jerky before she left. The slave saw a spider on her body. Later, the slave failed to escape, was caught and told the secret. Not long after, those who attacked were almost all killed when they went out with their friends and elders. Chu Su said. More than 10 people from 8 Limbs were killed, including senior totem warriors. Among the slaves who attacked them, there were more than 30 Tai slaves and at least 4 Pu slaves. If it was a one-on-one fight, even if it was a servant slave, it would only be equivalent to an ordinary intermediate totem warrior, and it would not be so tragic. However, these slaves were almost suicidal in their attacks. They did not even blink their eyes when it came to injuring the enemy and injuring themselves at the cost of injuring the enemy. They would do the same thing even if it meant injuring the enemy and injuring themselves at the cost of injuring themselves. Slaves were just tools. If the tools were gone, they could just make another one. Those slave owners didn't care. After that, the people from 8 Limbs killed all the slaves, no matter whether they were high class or low class. As long as they attacked, they wouldn't leave anyone alive. They wouldn't give anyone a chance to tell the secret. Chu Su looked at Xiao Xian and the other two. In fact, this kind of thing happened a lot. Almost every tribe has encountered it. Remember, those slaves can betray their own beliefs and ancestors. They can also betray anyone. Including betraying their masters? Xiao Xian asked. It depends on whether they dare or not. Different slave owners have different slaves. You'll know when you see more. Chu Su said. After the slave team left, they continued to move forward. The slave who was eaten only left a pool of blood stains and a few pieces of bones that couldn't be pieced together. Some scavenging insects circled around, sharing the last of the delicious meal. Xiao Xian and the others didn't encounter any more slave teams. They took different paths. The further they went, the clearer Xiao Xian could feel the dryness of the air. The surrounding vegetation was sparse. Compared with other places, the number of animals and plants was pitiful. The thin layer of grass on the ground had also withered. After another 5 days of continuous walking, some people in the team had begun to become dispirited. A little further ahead, there will be a tribe. We can rest there for a few days. An elder said. Hearing this, the young people were shocked. A tribe? There is a tribe here. What is it called? The Rain Tribe. Someone answered. Xiao Xian looked at the clear sky. The Rain Tribe. He didn't know how Yang Sui was doing. Had he successfully inherited the position of the Rain Tribe's shaman? Chapter 283. The surrounding land was getting drier and drier, and the creatures in the forest were not so active. After passing through several high mountains, they came to a hilly area. Standing on the top of a small hill, Xiao Xian saw some houses in the distance, as well as large tracts of farmland. However, those farmlands didn't seem to grow well. Because of the lack of water, they not only grew slowly, but also had a high mortality rate. As for further places, they couldn't see clearly, as if they were covered with layers of gauze. That was because there was too much dust in the air, which affected their vision. Because of the drought, when the wind blew, some dust would be brought up. The further they went, the more cracks there were on the ground. Although there were some sparse fine grass, the dry ground occupied most of their vision. That's the Rain Tribe. Huang Yi said to the young warriors who came here for the first time. When they went to the Rain Tribe, the elders would tell the young warriors some things about each tribe. Now that they saw the Rain Tribe, they would naturally tell them about the customs of the Rain Tribe. Although Xiao Xian knew Yang Sui of the Rain Tribe, he knew very little about this tribe. Therefore, when the middle-aged man was explaining to the young warriors of their tribe, Shao Xian, like the others, also listened attentively. It was always good to know more. The people of the Rain tribe, their totem is like rain, and they worship water. Their belief in rain is far beyond your imagination. If their tribesmen went to other places and drowned in the river or were eaten by aquatic beasts in the water, most of the time, they wouldn't feel sad. On the contrary, they believed that those who drowned or were eaten by aquatic beasts must have some kind of mysterious power that surpassed others. That was why they could send themselves to the place where God was without the help of external forces. Shao Xian and others. What the hell? In this case, the crocodiles of the drumming tribe were simply the spokesmen of God. It sounded ridiculous, but it was understandable. Every tribe had their own beliefs and worship. Many things that seemed extremely stupid in others' eyes were unswerving beliefs of some people. For this kind of belief, you couldn't change their minds even if you pried open their brains. It is said that the shamans of the Rain tribe who couldn't pray for rain were burned to death. Someone asked. Not all of them. I heard that in the beginning, there were cases of people being burned to death. But later, they couldn't pray for rain, and it was impossible for the tribe to have no shamans, so they changed it. But in this way, the status of shamans in the Rain tribe gradually declined. It's said that the Rain tribe's shaman candidates have to travel outside, hoping to find a solution. Then did you find him? A young warrior of the Feather tribe couldn't help but ask. The others looked at the warrior who asked the question as if he was an idiot. It sounds like a lie. How can it be possible to get rain? Even the shamans of our tribe can't do it. How can the shamans of the Rain tribe do it? The people from these small tribes just love to mess around. That's true. The others nodded. He felt that if his tribe couldn't do it, the people of such a small tribe wouldn't be able to do it either. Moreover, praying for rain sounded like a lie. How is God related to rain? But there's one thing I agree with. The divine echo can definitely fly. Yeah, definitely, said the Feather tribesman. Nonsense. How could a god have wings? It must have 8 hands. The people of 8 limbs said. Bullshit. God certainly doesn't look like that. When it came to what God looked like, the tribal warriors of different beliefs quarreled because of different opinions. The people of the Tian Shan tribe thought that God lived in the mountains, but the people of the Mang tribe vetoed that idea. They strongly believed that God should live in the woods, or the kind with bamboo forest. The people of the Thousand Masks tribe didn't speak, but their faces were full of disapproval, telling everyone their opinions. Shao Xian thought about the Yanjiao tribe. As people who had been brainwashed by shamans since childhood, taught by shamans, they only believed in 3 things: fire, totem, and ancestors. What was God? Was it the fire? Was it the incarnation of the totem? Or was it the deceased ancestor? Or all 3 of them? Listening to the discussions of the people around them, Lei and Tua touched their heads at the same time, and began to outline the appearance of God in their minds. If there was a God, it should be, with horns on the head, right? Anyway, it was definitely not those who had wings and played with spiders, let alone rain. Well, it must have horns on the head, and its strength was incomparable. Lei and Tua discussed and nodded. They felt that others were simply talking nonsense. Seeing that they were about to fight, the elders who had been staring at each other had to calm down and pull the excited young warriors apart. Hey! Who are those people? Lei asked, pointing to a group of people passing by not far away. Everyone stopped quarreling and looked over there. Over there, there was a team of 9 people. The people walking in front were wearing clothes woven with green rattan and yellow withered grass, with some wooden and bone ornaments. Each person held a pottery bowl in his hand, holding the bowl in one hand and dipping the other hand in the pottery bowl and swinging it vigorously to the side. They swung it every few steps. There should be water in the pottery bowl. Those people had some wooden bells made of nuts similar to walnuts hanging around their waists. Every time they swung their arms vigorously, because of the movement of their bodies, the wooden bells hanging around their waists would also swing, making a clattering sound, which sounded like the sound of rain hitting the ground. They are the people of the Rain tribe, Huang Yi said. Is that a sacrifice? Someone asked. I don't know, it may be related to their sacrifice. Anyway, let's find a place to rest now. Yes, the Rain tribe will provide houses for travelers to live in. We can just rest there, said someone who had traveled far. The team of the Rain tribe didn't walk fast. When Xiao Xian and his team arrived, they just passed by them. These people of the Rain tribe had totem patterns painted on their faces with paint, so their faces couldn't be seen clearly. But Xiao Xian still recognized Yang Sui, who was walking in the front. Yang Sui's clothes were a little different from the other 8 people behind him. They were more complicated, and the pottery bowl in his hand was not a simple one. It was a little higher, and there were some stripes and dots on the outside of the bowl, like running water and rainwater. Yang Sui also saw Xiao Xian. He was stunned and wanted to say something, but realized that it was not a good time to say hello and talk about the old days. Then he saw the people around Xiao Xian and thought of something. His eyes quickly moved to the tribe. He wanted Xiao Xian to go there first, and then he would talk to Xiao Xian after he finished here. The Rain tribe built a row of wooden houses on the edge of the tribe for travelers to live in. They only needed to pay a certain accommodation fee. Other people wouldn't pay for people who didn't belong to their tribe. Fortunately, Xiao Xian had a lot of money with him. He gave some shell coins to the guards of the Rain tribe to exchange for a wooden house for 3 people. The wooden house was very simple, but in such a place where trees were hard to see, they had to make do with it. They exchanged some dry food with the people of the Rain tribe. It was a kind of hard flatbread. Xiao Xian and the other 2 people were not used to it, especially Tua and Lei. They hunted ferocious beasts to fill their stomachs. It was the first time for them to eat such food in such a place. I think our tribe is really good, Lei said. Tua felt the same. Biting the hard flatbread, he asked Xiao Xian, how long do we have to stay here? Will we encounter places that are even worse than this in the future? How long we stay depends on the elders. As for the future, you'd better be mentally prepared. Xiao Xian gave them a, look. The expectant look on Lei and Tuo's faces suddenly collapsed. It was worse than this. They would rather go to the ferocious beast mountain forest alone for 10 days or 100 days than stay in such a place where even a beast was hard to see. No wonder they said before that this trip would be more difficult. After a short break, a young girl who brought in water smiled at Xiao Xian and gave Xiao Xian a leaf. After the girl left, Lei and Tuo winked and joked, Xian, is it the custom of the Rain tribe to give leaves? Is there anything written on the leaf? Let me see. Xiao Xian avoided the 2, quickly glanced at the words on the leaf, and then ground the leaf. Lei and Tuo's faces were disappointed. I'll go out for a while. If there is anything urgent on the team, blow the whistle. After a pause, Xiao Xian said again, guard against the people of Tianshan Mountain. I know. Go ahead, elder. Tuo waved his hand. Before leaving the cabin, Xiao Xian saw people looking at him from the window of another house. Over there, the people of the Tianshan tribe lived. Someone at the window was holding a bow, and the arrow was aimed at Xiao Xian. He did not shoot, but just kept the posture of aiming. Seeing Xiao Xian look at him, the man smiled, which made people feel very uncomfortable. The people of the Tianshan tribe were hostile to Xiao Xian and the other 2. Was it because of the Dishan tribe? Or was it because of other reasons? In any case, this kind of hostility made Xiao Xian always guard against them. No longer paying attention to the people over there, Xiao Xian knew that they did not dare to do anything blatantly. After leaving the cabin, Xiao Xian went in one direction, where there was a small hill. There were some cabins on the hill, which did not belong to the Rain tribe. Xiao Xian would not be stopped. These cabins were much more dilapidated than the place where they had temporarily rested. Looking at the straw rope hanging on one of the cabins, Xiao Xian walked over. The door panel was half closed, and Xiao Xian saw the people in the room. One was the young girl who gave him water and leaves, and the other person sitting on the ground was Yang Sui. At this moment, Yang Sui was holding an oxtail, gazing at it affectionately. Before the young girl gave him water, Xiao Xian had seen her once. She followed Yang Sui, but at that time it was difficult to recognize her because of the pattern on her face and her clothes. When Xiao Xian came, the girl was talking in a low voice. Hearing the noise, she stopped and looked up at Xiao Xian. "You're here." Yang Sui did not look very good. After washing the pattern on his face, there were dark circles around his eyes. "You don't seem to be doing well. Did you fail to become a shaman?" Xiao Xian asked. "No, I'm a shaman now, but I'm about to fail." Yang Sui sighed. "You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.